What up, people? We're live. Welcome back to another episode of Derailed, courtesy of Arcaicskidz. I'm, of course, Arcaicskidz. Our co-host is here with us, Magnus Panvyda. He's looking to talk nuclear, and eventually we might do that when the guest shows up.
Right.
Mark's running behind
right now.
Yeah, Mark's running behind. He's got something going on. So he'll be joining us shortly. Magnus, you were just telling me about something that Breonna Taylor's mom did that was based as shit. So what's up?
She went to the news and essentially called out the national BLM organization, like not the movement, but the national organization. And then like a lot of like the cringe activists and grifters being like, y'all ain't done shit for us. The only thing that's ever done anything for us is the community. Fucking people raised money for us and we never saw any of that. Like, fuck all y'all. I was like, get them.
Right on. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yes. Clean up all of these movements.
I know there was a bunch of stories coming out about one of the founding members or something buying like a shit ton of houses recently and all this stuff. And I'm like, hey, what about Breonna's family? Like, and not just hers, but like,
Yeah, that's just always the thing that like I run into with conservatives all the time about the BLM movement. Is they're like, well, the national organization and say they're trained Marxists and blah, blah, blah. And they have all these connections to all these shady like DNC stuff. And then it's like, yeah. And the activists on the ground know that. And they hate the fucking national organization too. That's not news to a lot of these folks on the ground. Like it was a couple months ago where like BLM Chicago, DC, and a couple other places like openly like condemned them. And we're like, we aren't part of them anymore. We're going to create our own thing. Like the Detroit version of it don't even like technically call themselves BLM. They go by a different name, even though it's like the same, mission and movement and all that. Right. So like that's how much like people don't understand what the fuck is actually going on, and including like the liberal people. Because when I posted about that woman buying all those fucking mansions, like plenty of people like jumped in like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And why are you talking bad about the movement? And I'm like, dude, it's not even my movement. This is coming from BLM people that are like, fuck the national organization,
Yeah.
This ain't me.
I saw that Maj Toure had some stuff to say about that. And I respect the shit out of that dude.
Maj is like one of my North Stars. I fucking love that man.
Yeah, he's badass. But he had some stuff to say about it, and I liked what he was saying. He was like, but I also am like, well, she's kind of proven she's not a Marxist. So like she's out there buying all these houses or whatever. Like, I guess there's that. Did you see, this was a few months back. There was a video where the Salt Lake chapter of BLM actually did like a press conference with the Proud Boys, and we're like, no, we stand for a lot of the same stuff here.
Yeah, they that was like one of the original kind of like unity like inspirations, I guess, was they marched with Proud Boys up in Salt Lake for like drug decriminalization or something. Like we can disagree on all this other stuff, but like let's get our kids out of fucking jail for pot.
Yeah,
and I was like, oh god,
kind of a good idea.
If Proud Boys and BLM can get along, then like why can't we? And they got so much crap from the Twitter crowd for that and they were disavowed. And then Jafari Jones in Virginia of BLM 757, he gets all sorts of crap. And then now the Georgia Panthers, which are like some of my best friends now. Like I love all the Georgia Black Panthers. Those people are fucking awesome. Yeah. They're getting attacked for like talking to like other people outside. And it's like, yeah, dude, I posted this whole big rant that I streamed to Twitter about these Pied Piper gatekeeping.
Oh, I know. I watched it.
Do nothing fucking activists that they sit on Twitter and they don't do anything. They don't help their community. They don't go out. They don't run nothing. The best they'll do is run a podcast or something. They're not involved in anything. And at most they go and vote for the DNC. So it's like, fuck all these people. Like, don't care what they have to say. And you see that growing because like you see people calling out like the BLM national org. You see what's going on in the
What
LP.
Up, Stacy?
Yeah, you see what's going on in the LP of like the LP trying to clean all these people out. You kind of saw to a degree, but obviously not as much with like the Trump takeover of the Republican Party. The DNC needs it. Like somebody needs to like go into the DNC and start causing hell. That was supposed to be like the Squad and everything, but they're a bunch of sellouts. But you're definitely seeing like
I love watching Jimmy Dore call them out. That's one of my
and
favorite
then you got Maj Touré. He went on Fox News and he was like fuck all these fake conservatives and these fake black conservatives that don't do anything for the community. And it was like you're seeing this grow where it's like we have this parasitic class that's like attached to every political movement and every activism organization, and just derailed it away from what it's supposed to be about.
Yeah,
and people are starting to wake up to that, and that's why I'm excited to talk about nuclear, because nuclear is the best example of that, for the fact that like a lot of the biggest like nuclear proponent people that speak up the most about it are environmentalists.
Yeah,
and we go and we're like, dude, the environmental movement has been like hijacked by money and grifters and idiots that do not actually care about the planet at all. And the whole nuclear conversation is like a big part of it.
The first show I did with Mark, who maybe eventually will show up, was he said that the oil and natural gas companies have hijacked it. They're the ones that fund all the propaganda for windmills and solar panels and all this stuff. And they make it like, oh, nuclear is the devil.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, nuclear is the future. Like,
that's the thing too, is like the news will hesitate to talk. They'll hesitate to talk about like oil spills and tankers that like blow up in the ocean and like millions of gallons of oil in the water. We don't talk about Katrina anymore, like the Gulf oil spill. We just don't talk about that anymore. No. Or like all these instances of like oil and
what
coal.
About the ducks? I thought the environmentalists cared about the
right.
Ducks.
All these awful events that have happened around the oil and coal industry, and then like you won't hear about that. But they'll make movies and documentaries and talk about anything to do with nuclear till the end of fucking time.
Oh yeah.
And I think the actual stats is like in terms of like raw environmental, like irreparable damage to the environment, like nuclear has like 1% of how much like damage coal and oil has done in terms of like people and the environment.
Yeah, I actually, since my last show with Mark, I wanted to find out how many people have been killed by nuclear power. Not nuclear weapons, nuclear power. And you can't find it. You cannot get an actual number. They will attribute things that are not attributable.
They do the same thing they do with guns. They'll include nuclear warheads in the death toll of nuclear energy.
Kind of like when they include like suicide.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, that's not gun violence. Like that's
Reed if
Reed's gonna get murdered.
Yeah, Reed, if you keep trolling the chat, I'm gonna call Highway Patrol and say that you're driving overweight and you're gonna get pulled over. I saw this truck.
I will sick DOT on you, bro.
I saw this truck. He went right past the way station. I swear to God. Was this fucking anarchist?
Yeah, like he's. Last time I saw him, he was driving a black Kenworth 800. I'm just saying. So you
bullseyed him.
No, that's not his normal truck. That's why I said
the
it.
FBI is just like rapidly typing right now.
Well, now he finally said something decent. Cops kill more people than nuclear power. That is
a statistical fucking fact of reality.
Cops kill more people in 1 year than nuclear power has ever killed.
Right. Because even as awful as Chernobyl was, like the death toll was inflated by like Western powers.
51 people.
Yeah, and then it was downplayed by Russia because Russia was obviously like nobody died, comrade. Everything's fine,
come on.
But like after all the investigation and looking into it, like it even like secondary and tertiary deaths don't really go over like 1,000 or anything like that. To where there's people dying from like crazy, like fracking gone wrong, their pipes light, the water lights on fire shit. Like hundreds of people died from that. Hundreds of people died from like coal fucking shit like that. Lung complications due to energy burning. Black lung. Yeah, all this happens.
One of the things that I will push back a little, fracking does get a bad rap, and from a guy that came out of the oil field, fracking, yes, it has its issues for sure, but
fracking is the same thing as like when
banning fracking is a terrible idea.
Yeah, fracking has the same thing to where like the instances that fracking has gone horribly fucking wrong, it goes horribly wrong. Like it's not to downplay that
for sure.
But how often it goes horribly wrong is Jesus Christ, Reed.
I'm gonna kill you, Reed.
Oh my God.
You live like one state away from me. You know that, right?
Like, I'm gonna see you at Porkfest, and I'm gonna give you a titty twister just for that comment. Oh my god! But yeah,
Black lungs matter.
See, now I plan on doing 2 streams a week, and my other stream I'm just gonna be like dicking around on the computer, and I'm gonna live for Reed just appearing, keeping himself entertained while he drives through Utah.
Do you never like? I find it hilarious that he's such a troll on Twitter and in everyone else's chat, but then he takes his show super serious. Like
then he's like, I'm super serious.
I mean, he can't take it too serious.
I'm the naturalist capitalist.
He brings on people like Ryan Dawson who just like say hilarious shit.
Wild shit.
That was a great show this morning, Reed, by the way.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch. I did get to watch your little Unity chat the other day. That was super cool. I'm all about that.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
I fall asleep to all you motherfuckers now. Fucking Stacy. Fucking
real guests.
Josh.
Oh yeah, you're dead, dude. I wasn't going to Porkfest, but now me and Magnus have a beating too.
Yeah, I want to go. I'm gonna have to get it together. That's like the issue. Is just I'm so mega poor. Like, people dramatically underestimate like how much money I don't have.
That may be the first time.
Like
someone
explain
it that way.
Fiorella and like Nico and all of them like in Washington D.C. got to like see it like firsthand because like the shirt I'm wearing, it was like the Action for Hassan shirt. We were making them there, and I'm like, can I take a couple of those? And they're like, sure, why? And I'm like, well, I don't really have clothes. So I just took a bunch of Action for Hassan.
Because I shop at Goodwill when I have like 8.
No, I don't shop at Goodwill. I get hand-me-downs and shoplift. That's where I'm at.
Okay, well there you go.
In Minecraft, not in real life.
Well,
I'm a law-abiding anarchist. Yes. I back the blue.
Maybe we'll see if we can help you out with that. We'll have a Make Magnus Not Poor fundraiser or something.
I know Stacy was like we'll do salsa dancing lessons to pay for you to go to Porkfest, and I'm like, I don't know how to fucking salsa dance.
Cool, right after you teach me.
Right. To be fair, I've picked up like a lot of skills in like the last 2 weeks because the intro to my podcast, that's like the second time I've ever done video editing, like ever. And then the like the backgrounds and everything that I'm doing in Photoshop and all of that, like I've never touched Photoshop before. So and now I'm using Photoshop to make a presentation to give at the LP convention in Michigan in like a couple weeks. I was like,
well, that's cool.
Learn on your feet, I guess.
By the way, I saw your intro and I got super jealous. And I told my wife, who's supposed to like edit an intro for me, like, what are you doing, man? Like, I'm getting showed up by like an anarchist boogaloo boy. They got a bunch of people to cancel coming on my show. Like, this is messed up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I kind of had it in my head of I wanted to make like a music video, like a propaganda music video. And that's essentially like what it looked like in my head for like the last month. So I just kind of had to put it together and learn how to video edit. And I was like, oh, you think it'd be easy, but this is actually a fucking pain in the ass. Like,
yeah, it is. Like she actually worked on it yesterday for several hours and she got so frustrated and she's like, I don't know, you have to help me. And I'm like, I am a boomer. I cannot help you. I don't know.
I'm only 27 and I'm the biggest like technology boomer ever. Like, Like I tell people I'm a hippie and they're like, oh, that's cute. And I'm like, no, I mean it. Like I was
like
raised,
for real.
like raised with fucking wolves, dude. Like I don't know how, like I barely make this thing work.
I will go to Porkfest and probably pay for Ryan's ticket if Ryan goes to Porkfest. Not even kidding.
Yeah, somebody pay for my
ticket too.
Somebody pay for my ticket and I can maybe go.
We'll talk after. We'll figure stuff out.
Because I was supposed to go. It sucks because I was supposed to go to the Unity event in Texas with like Dan Bremen and all of them, and then I got a $200 ticket from a road pirate. So
dirty bastards.
That kind of killed that right there. For expired tags in the middle of a pandemic when the fucking Secretary
I'm
of
telling
State
you right
closed,
now, like,
bro.
Okay, so I got all the video now of the what I can't remember his name, unfortunately. The 13-year-old that got killed the other day. Okay, fine. He had a gun, whatever. He didn't have it when you shot him. So that's not an argument to me. But my point is that, like, immediately these neocons do this all the time, right? They're like, well, I mean, he's a criminal. He's 13, dude. You shot a child. I don't care.
The worst one I saw was last night with what happened in Brooklyn Center, to where they had publicly announced, and you can go on the Brooklyn Center PD, that there would not be a curfew last night. So people went out. And like, yes, people were throwing fucking water bottles and bullshit at the riot police. They have Bearcats and AR-15s. Cry me a river, okay? I don't care if somebody
have water bottles.
Yeah, I don't care if someone throws a fucking can of soup at them. It's a deadly weapon. Blow me, okay? I genuinely don't care. But so like, yeah, whatever. Like, it's the typical like, oh, they have umbrellas and they're trading pepper spray and throwing water bottles and everything like that. And then at 10 o'clock, which I had people on the ground there, like that were watching shit, that are friends of mine, that are journalists or whatever. At 10 o'clock, they essentially blocked off every single street around the police station where all the protesters were. And then at 10:30, they announced that they were doing an emergency curfew at 11 o'clock. So essentially just told everybody, like, hey, you have 30 minutes to get out or we're going to arrest all of you. But they had already
just garbage.
They had already kettled the crowd, and that they were arresting people that were trying to leave as early as like 10:45, 10:56, like earlier than the curfew actually went into effect. And a lot of people, like including one of my friends, she's a journalist there, didn't get a notification on her phone that a curfew had gone into effect until like 11:20. So that's where you see all the crazy videos of people being like, well, shit, they put a curfew in. I don't want to get arrested. So they go get in their car and they start driving down the street. And all of a sudden there's a bunch of National Guard pointing fucking rifles at them, being like, get out of the car, get on the ground. It's
those
like,
videos are insane.
It's like, and what broke me was these fucking bootlickers are like, maybe they'll know better than to be out after curfew next time. And it's like, dude. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
I support freedom in the Constitution. Do you? Do you really?
No, I genuinely don't believe in a fucking curfew. They're like, oh, it keeps the city from burning down. It makes the cops' job easier. I don't care about making the police's job easier.
I absolutely don't care about that. And it also doesn't work. That's not what it does.
Oh, it prevents looting. Like, okay, dude. So why is the entire police department and the National Guard standing around the police station and not in the communities, preventing businesses from being looted? Because they don't care about the fucking businesses. They care about the police station.
Right. Yeah. Well, that was something
that's probably like the nicest thing I can say about the Minneapolis Police Department is they did just genuinely abandon the police department and then like continue to like protect the businesses there and just let the police department get burned down. Yeah. It's like, great, dude. Cause like, I don't give a shit about your police department. I give a shit about the people around, and those protesters that are mad at the cops are not the people that are looting. People that are looting are just random people that know that all the cops are distracted. So it's open season,
It's fair. Yeah.
It's the same thing with hurricanes. Like, think about hurricanes. Do you think like the people running into New Orleans are anti-hurricane, or do they just know that all the police are gone and everything's up for grabs? It's the same thing with these folks. Like I've had conversations.
Which, by the way, but I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm going to interrupt you right quick. People say, the U.S. government's never disarmed their population. Bullshit. Katrina. It absolutely.
They fired on people.
Yeah.
They fired on. It was a black family crossing a bridge into an area, and they fired on them. On top of all the other crazy stories of beating up old ladies and fucking pulling boats over at gunpoint and confiscating their firearms.
Yeah. No, no, I don't.
And people deny that. It's like, dude, we have the footage of it.
Yeah.
We literally have the footage. And it's not even ambiguous footage. We have the New Orleans police chief saying no one will be allowed to own guns. We have the police commissioners going around saying we're confiscating firearms. And then we have the National Guard talking to MSNBC or something, one of those networks, being like, we might have to shoot Americans. And it's like, people still deny
What more do you need to know?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah, I don't believe in the curfews at all. I think that's bullshit. I don't care. Like, even as an anarchist, I would be more willing.
Well, you can't believe in a curfew at all. Even if you're just a boomer neocon, you shouldn't. Like, who are you to tell me when I have to be at home?
And who are you to tell me why I'm there?
Yeah,
you know, like you have no idea why the fuck I'm there.
First of all, curfews violate your First Amendment. And if you're a constitutionalist, I'm just saying, maybe you should be like, I'll stay out as late as I want for whatever reason I want. You know what I mean?
They've made it a team sport. They don't care. Like, it's whatever the police is doing is good. And, you know, to be perfectly fair, there's people also that are, no matter what the cops do, the cops are bad.
True.
So it's become a team sport. It's become a team sport. It doesn't matter. Like, rationality does not fucking matter.
Yeah, I've run into some trouble over the last couple of months where I'm like, well, I mean, if you shoot at a cop and they shoot back, you can't really get mad at the cop. I mean, because if you shoot at me, I'm gonna shoot back too. Yeah. Dummy.
That's my gauge. That's my gauge usually, is like, as a person, what would I do in that situation? And what would I be able to get away with as a person?
Well, you would not get away with what the cops get away with. That's for sure.
That's what I mean. Like in there is cases like I think it was like in California, some guy like shot a cop and then he killed him, and people kind of got mad about it. And it's like, if somebody shot me, I'm killing him. Like, so like, that's like,
yeah.
And also, as a person, I would take that to trial and I would walk. So that's my line. If I can do it and I can walk away clean, then I will look at it differently. But like, if there's video of me shooting a 13-year-old with his hands up, I'm going to jail. If I negligently discharge my firearm unintentionally, even if nobody's hurt, even if I just put a hole in the drywall, I'm going to jail.
Wait, you mean yelling taser, taser, taser doesn't change the game?
Have you seen the memes around that of like the picture of like the cop with like the AT4? Like, taser,
my favorite one today, I saw it today, was the Oklahoma City building, and it said taser, taser, taser. With that building
that's
blown in half.
That's fucking spicy right there. Damn. I agree.
But most people don't also know, look, whatever you want. Okay, Timothy McVeigh did kill a whole bunch of people. I get that, right? And I'm not saying what he did was right. What I am saying is that was in response to Waco.
Yeah. Which is, again, people don't understand cause and effect. They don't understand what's going on.
Right. So
everything is in response to Waco. And then Waco was a response to the civil rights movement because of how the police did. Like, all this is snowballed from that. And people don't want to look at it that way. And I get it all the time of like, oh, you're trying to conflate these two things. Like, that's for blah. I'm like, fuck off, dude. Like, they are connected. Like, if you deliberately, it always comes from people that are trying to like bogart victimhood, essentially, or bogart like the value of revolutionary cause or any of that bullshit. It's like, no, dude. Like, I could say for a fact that the no-knock tactics that were used in Waco were originally devised by police officers going after civil rights leaders. And then they took that tactic they used in Waco, and then they went, they took that and did that with Ruby Ridge and Waco, and then they took those tactics and went right back into the cities and started doing no-knock raids.
Yeah.
Like, look at ATF raids, and then look at pictures of any no-knock raid in the ghetto over fucking drugs.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Exact same gear, exact same tactic.
I'm glad you brought that up. I want to ask you, I don't know, maybe you're too poor to have seen it, but have you ever seen the docudrama series about Waco on Netflix?
No, I haven't seen it. I mean, I've heard things.
And I didn't mean that you're too poor. I just like
I'm fucking poor. I will not get offended by the fact that I'm poor. I'm literally wearing a welfare protest shirt right now.
We are all going to help Magnus out. Eventually, I'm going to help him out too. Looks like our guest is getting real close to being able to join us finally. So that's good. But I'm going to finish this thought. The Waco situation, the docuseries on Netflix was really good. I'm going to give them a lot of credit. They also brought in one of the guys that was a member of the Branch Davidians, and they also brought in the FBI negotiator. They both had wrote books about it. One of their biggest problems that they had in that situation was that the ATF wanted to make a show of saving babies
because they were about
the
to get
Ruby
shut
Ridge
down
because they looked so bad after Ruby Ridge. They want to make a
they were
show
on the
of
verge. They were on the verge of getting shut down. Like the next, I think, like they were literally just a few months away from a budgetary.
You're coming on, Mark.
hearing.
Hang on, give me a second.
Yeah, they were just a few months away from a budgetary meeting that would have like totally erased the ATF from existence.
Yep. Yeah,
and they needed to justify their fucking existence.
They needed a win, and what we got was a bunch of dead people. So that didn't.
A bunch of dead fucking kids.
Somehow they managed to come through it.
And David Chipman's getting put in charge of the ATF. Never forget that. There's pictures of him standing over dead kids.
Right. Now we are shifting subjects, ladies and gentlemen, because we have the one and only and eventual Mark Schneider. Mark!
Hey, sorry.
Better late than never. Yeah. You're turning into a real libertarian now.
Hey, you were celebrating, right? It happens.
I was, yeah. It was, just, my girls had end up having a sleepover, and so my wife said, you have a date night, and then there was a mix-up with the reservations, and they were slow getting the food, so I had everything timed out to be perfect at, like 8:30, and then more delays, so sorry
about the best laid plans, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah.
All right. Well, Mark, I'm sure most of the people tuning in do know you, but why don't you give a brief introduction of who you are and what you're about?
Yeah. So I did 20 years in the Navy working on nuclear-powered submarines and aircraft carrier. When I retired from the Navy, I got a job working at a commercial nuclear power plant. So I got 23 years of nuclear power experience. And then my wife is also a nuclear engineer. We have the nerdiest pillow talk on the planet. I like always mentioning that. And my hobbies, I talk about nuclear energy. I promote nuclear energy. My wife and I discuss it. That's just, part of our life is just, nuclear. So my wife wants to jump in and say hi. So she's going to jump in here real quick. She can't hear you because, so that's my wife. She's way hotter and smarter than me. So.
wholesome content.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
we got to keep
it on Derailed.
We got to keep it light after complaining about the ATF and then probably talking a bunch about the what I would put it, the targeted campaign against nuclear energy from a lot of weird things. Because I guess we haven't talked before. Me and you would be considered strange allies to normal people, but it actually makes sense if you think about it. Because I'm a huge lifelong environmental activist, but I've sung the praises of nuclear my whole life. Yeah. A lot of people don't put those together.
It's funny. I have a cousin that he's pretty big in the cannabis industry, and we're constantly talking about how nuclear energy and cannabis can work together. By law, I cannot consume cannabis. If I consume any kind of cannabis material, THC related, I will, lose my job for at least, I think it's 3 years. And then if I have a second hit, I permanently will not ever get a nuclear clearance whatsoever. But I'm constantly talking with the cannabis industry. So I get that whole uncommon allies thing. I want to promote nuclear because, I see I use cannabis as such a great example where they are doing great things where they have not just with cannabis, but with food in general, right? How do we make food in, the super great way, that's, that requires, these ideal conditions that require large quantities of light, which means large amounts of energy. How do we consume that? How do we produce that energy so that we can then produce super high quality food? So it's just fascinating that, I don't have a problem making allies with anyone. And I was kind of the front runner for nuclear getting involved with crypto and with cannabis. So
definitely interested in crypto, how that's going on with that, because definitely everything comes down to energy. The upper limits of all of this come down to energy. And when it comes to urban farming and greenhouses and stuff like that, the hard limit's just the energy. We have the space, we have the soul, we have the soil for it. We could take over all these abandoned buildings in Detroit and grow food for the entire planet, but the energy,
that's fascinating. I was on another podcast recently, and one of the things that I brought up was I used the Oklo reactor. So Oklo is a company that have a reactor called the Aurora. It produces 1.5 megawatts. It's about 1,000 homes, right? But stick that into the basement of a skyscraper because it only requires a quarter-acre plot. Right. So stick that in the basement of a skyscraper. You now have an off the grid skyscraper in the middle of a building that you can use to produce food, right? Because you have a couple of floors dedicated towards growing, right? And so now your food is literally right there, right? If you use things like aquaponics where you're using fish, you're feeding the fish, their waste then is used to grow your fruits and vegetables. It's all right there in this one building. You have zero transportation costs, right? Transportation is one of the biggest producers of, emissions that cause, that are the concerns for global warming. I don't like being an absolutist on global warming is man-made or not, but the concerns of those emissions, right? Whether it's, the gases from, cars are deadly. We know that because people commit suicide with them. But imagine if you could basically eliminate, needing to bring in big trucks just to bring in food, right? So your transportation costs are suddenly reduced because you can literally have a self-contained building inside a city, and then everyone goes more towards the water.
About a vertical farm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Vertical urban farming, which like they're kind of experimenting with here in Detroit, but like the big issue obviously is like the power bill and the electric with it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people focus on the greenhouse gases and stuff like that, but there's just other elements to it to where like we are expanding, so we have to build new roads that displaces native species, kind of disrupts habitats, the amount of wildlife that gets killed on the road and everything like that. When you see a dead animal on the road, it was probably hit by a semi truck, because we have to truck everything all across the country constantly, and building new power lines, cutting down trees to build new power lines.
Yeah.
Like there's so many deeper factors into it. And I think the focus on just the greenhouse gases is kind of deliberate,
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a great point.
I think that's true.
Well, and people don't realize how much power is lost in transmission, right? I mean, you're having to jack up voltages up to 500,000 to 1 million volts for long-term transmission, right? And there's a huge amount of power loss just in that line, right? Called I²R loss. Basically, you're wasting heat. If it's right there, right? If it's localized, then you don't have to worry about stepping up and stepping down. You could literally have your generator producing the 240 volt output that you need to power, or 480 volt probably, because you're gonna have large scale components. But you don't need it to produce 35,000 volts, 100,000, 200, 230, 500. These are the standard levels that they use for transmission. You don't need that because you're right there. Or and one of the things that I do every time I go around, when I'm driving around, where I live down in southeastern Virginia, I look for substations. And every substation where I live is a plot that's at least a quarter acre, if not an acre. And you could throw multiple of these tiny reactors, of these micro reactors there, and you could literally just put a breaker into the substation. So now, let's say, I use Texas for example, right, where you had, the snowfall comes in, covers all solar panels. Solar panels aren't making any power. It freezes the wind turbines because the wind turbines are not designed for that freeze. The natural gas flow stops because by law, you have to send your natural gas to the homes first. So now you have natural gas being, cut off to the power plants. And you have a nuclear power plant shutting down because they had a line freeze. Because guess what? They have open turbines, because south of a certain line, you don't expect that deep of a cold, right? So you entirely shut down your grid. But if you have these micro reactors set up at every single substation, you have a big, power outage. Yeah, I'm sorry, Dallas, Fort Worth, you might be out of power, but every small community is going to have their own power. So I don't have to stress about
are these micro reactors like thorium salt? Like what kind of reactors are they? Because I'm not super familiar with that.
So this particular reactor, the Aurora, is actually powered off of spent nuclear fuel from currently operating reactor.
So it's essentially it's a form of recycling almost, which is even better.
Yes, yeah. One, and they're licensed and have approval from their design is not licensed, but they have their fuel source. Their first fuel source is going to come from the Experimental Breeder Reactor 2 project, which shut down in the 90s, I think. And so their first fuel load is going to come from the spent nuclear fuel from that project. And then they would like to get in and acquire spent nuclear fuel. Now, Oklo has a great partnership with the U.S. Department of Energy. They're going to build in Idaho for their first project. They're expecting to get their license in 2023. So
that sounds like a great partnership.
Yeah. So and one thing I learned from talking with Caroline Cochran, their CEO or their COO, sorry, Justin DeWitt or Jacob DeWitt is their CEO. They're a married couple that are super nerds like my wife and I. But when you apply for a license with the NRC, there's a 3-year time requirement just written into the regulations. Whether they get it done in 2 months or 15 years, depending on how much work is required, you're waiting 3 years minimum, period. That's it.
Just takes 3 years, and that's not something that can change. Is that something that people can start putting pressure on these regulatory bodies to change that?
There is, and I'm going to talk vaccines just from the FDA regulation standpoint. I'm not promoting or saying vaccine
right. As an example.
Yeah. So there's a normal time frame when you do a vaccine. You have to have this vaccine in production, X number of months of testing, and through executive action you can slash that. So we could slash that time. But there. So
if we got the right executive, they could say, "Look, we're going to move forward on nuclear, and to do that, we're going to start slashing some of this regulatory holdbacks."
Absolutely, yeah, you absolutely could do that, and that's where I think we can come from. I don't know if Biden's the right guy for that. I think Trump was.
Not unless Biden doesn't know he's doing it.
They're all hung up on the Green New Deal stuff, which, like, again, as an environmentalist, so I'm coming from a place of like, this is my jam and everything. Modern environmentalism has nothing to do with the environment. It has nothing to do with protecting animals or the forest or the climate or anything like that. It's a lot of special interest. It's a lot of government society building and very little to do with the planet.
So when I look at the two major political parties in the U.S., right? I look at the Republicans or the Democrats, right? It's basically that's all of Congress and all of the Senate, right? And when I look at nuclear energy, it's not a left versus right fight. It's an up versus down fight. And you've got basically the centrists that are very much in line with thinking nuclear is great. You've got a Democrat senator in West Virginia, which is a state that can't build nuclear, and you have a Republican senator in West Virginia. They're both pro-nuclear, right? They're very centrist, right? They're not on the fringes. But when you look at the fringe, you look at the Bernie Sanders, you look at the Elizabeth Warrens, and then you look at the far left and the far right. They're basically being controlled by the oil lobby, right? The oil lobby is anti-nuclear because it is their biggest competitor. They are the ones who actually put the regulations, or I would say they didn't place them in place, but they lobbied to get the regulations in place for the nuclear industry. And then they're promoting renewable energy because renewable energy is effectively welfare for the oil and gas industry, right? Because when you get done, I build a solar farm or a wind farm. Guess what I have to build with that wind or solar farm? I have to build an equivalent power station of the same power that's powered by oil, coal, or natural gas, right? Because when the wind stops blowing or the sun stops shining, I have to make up that power. And so the oil and gas industry is like, oh yeah, we'll build this. You're going to pay for me to build this, solar farm or this wind farm. And then I'm going to say, well, I got to build this other thing. And you're, to meet that. So you're going to give me more money for that. I mean, $7 billion a year in subsidies for wind and solar, $21 billion a year in subsidies for, the oil and gas industry. And in the nuclear industry, if you want new construction, this is federal government, new construction, if you get your license, you might get a 21 million with an M subsidy just to submit for a license. And that's the only subsidy you're going to get. You might get a loan. The government might give you a loan, but they're not going to pay you. They're not going to give you, here's a blank check, build your nuclear power plant like they do for wind and solar.
Right.
Because Plant Vogtle has received like $8 billion in federal loans that they have to pay back. Southern Company has to pay back to build the 2 new units down in Georgia.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know about, especially with like solar, the negative kickbacks that the oil and gas get, to where when they overproduce, sometimes they have to pay people to take that energy. That does happen a lot, especially in Germany, where will actually be like a negative cost of energy because they'll have excess energy. They'll have to pay people to use this power. that money goes to Gazprom. That money goes to so the oil industries are rubbing their hands kind of looking at this stuff.
So it's interesting. I was talking with a gentleman out in Utah at one point, and their wind and solar, when they have excess energy, they just shunt a lot of power to ground. And then that way they can claim that they're producing 25% renewable energy. But when they have those huge swings, they're just like, we're just going to ground it out. We're just going to basically waste this energy. But we're going to claim we're 25%, even though we're not really 25%. So that's, speaking from, an environmentalist standpoint is that, yes, we want this power, but we got to have power that's useful, right? And when you look at at peak wind and peak solar, it's actually offset from peak demand. So solar basically shuts down as you're coming into peak demand, and wind hits peak 2 hours after you've passed that peak. So literally in your valleys of power is when wind and solar are producing the most.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I do have a question. It was something that my wife had mentioned to me, and I found it to be a very interesting question. What is the ability of a nuclear power plant to increase or decrease power as it's needed? Is that something that you can do, or is that something that you're going to have to kind of transfer power around to other systems?
So what you're talking about, and the term in the industry is called ramping your unit up and down. So, large scale nuclear power plants, they ramp at like a 3% per hour rate. Now you're talking 1,000 megawatts, right? That's actually quite a bit of power that you can ramp. I mean, that's a huge amount of power, 3%, right? 1,000 megawatts, it's like 30 megawatts of power. The Oak Grove reactor is 1.5 megawatts, right? So 1,000 homes is 1.5. So you're talking 20,000 homes worth of ramping, per hour. Now they don't like to ramp, especially at the end of core life. It becomes there's a fission product called xenon that's produced that absorbs neutrons, and you could shut your reaction down.
It's a xenon gas, right?
Yeah, xenon gas. Yeah. Xenon.
I do slightly know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So I'd like to call xenon as the slayer of reactors. But when you're talking
that was part of the whole Chernobyl thing, was them not
yes.
Well, obviously there's the thing with the fuel rods and everything, but they also did not account for that and let it get out of control.
Yeah, because they come down to power, and then they didn't anticipate the xenon, so they had to basically provide, the term is reactivity. They had to make up for that, and they withdrew their safety rods. We could talk about Chernobyl in detail. That's a fun topic. But so
only after we answer the first question.
Yeah. So large scale reactors struggle with this. Now the Navy, on the other hand, we ramped up and down all day long. When I was in the Navy, it's not uncommon to go from operating at low power down at say 16%, trolling around. It's simulate there's torpedoes in the water. Minutes later, we're at full power, freaking plants chugging along. By the way, nuclear reactors sing. They actually hum when you get up in power.
That.
Yeah, they actually make this cool whistling sound. At least the Ohio class submarines, they actually put in some things to prevent that. It's literally you take a bottle and you blow on it. The steam literally as you're going across, the steam stops. It's blowing across. There's a drain line in it, and the steam's going across. And it's basically making a whistling sound similar to that effect.
As horrifying as it can be if it goes wrong, it's actually really beautiful.
It is, yeah.
The descriptions of the sky over Chernobyl when it blew was wow, that actually sounds quite nice if it wasn't for the massive Soviet disaster,
Yeah, well, and now I do like when Chernobyl's a great thing to bring up, right? Anytime you have nuclear conversation, you can bring up waste weapons meltdowns, and then we've touched a little bit. We're going to talk more about thorium too, because if we don't talk about thorium,
well, I don't know if we're going to. We might just leave the cultists on their heels for another show.
That sounds like fun. But the RBMK design was a very flawed design. We never built any of those in the U.S. First off, if you take an RBMK and you put it in a U.S. reactor, U.S. reactor complex, and they went through that stupid test that Chernobyl did, the reactor would have exploded, and it would have been contained inside the containment building, because we have containment buildings that are designed to take telephone poles at 200 miles an hour, right, without causing any damage. So we would not have had the problem. I mean, it would have destroyed the reactor, but it would not have would not have been the catastrophic loss of life, all that stuff. It would have been a U.S. based facility, but then our reactor designs and even the VVER, which is the Russian pressurized water reactor, can't undergo that level of explosion. Now, we are susceptible to like the Fukushima style accident, but in the 90s, the U.S. put in a system called station blackout diesels. So I'll use, so we had in 2011 on March 11th, you had the Fukushima accident occur where they washed out their safety systems. Those exact reactor designs are used in the U.S. as well. But the U.S. in the 90s said, hey, flooding is a problem. So let's put a diesel that's not, say, your diesel, all your emergency systems are located down below, so that, if a telephone pole thrown by a tornado is going to not damage your emergency systems. But what happens if you flood out, right? The U.S. said, that's not a good idea. So we're going to put in this backup to the backups. And we're going to put this diesel in that's high, and you can power your systems with it. So if Diablo Canyon in the 90s or, in 2011, they had that tsunami had washed out Diablo Canyon, their station blackout diesel, because of the power loss, would have kicked online. They would have provided power, and they'd have been shut down for a couple of months before they went back online, to fix everything, and they'd be back online in a couple of months. The Japanese, their version of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission didn't require that of the utilities. And so, I know libertarians, regulation does work. And here's a case the U.S. said, where the U.S. said, hey, we see a problem that we need to fix, right? More in line of a, there is overregulation. We could talk about carpet too, where, we
are going to do that, but we also have a special guest that's going to pop in who has a question for Mark. I don't know if you've met him yet, so maybe this will be your first run-in with him, but he's a great dude. I know Magnus knows him pretty well. The Naturalist Capitalist, Reed Coverdale. What's up, my brother?
How's it going, guys? I haven't.
This is the first time I've talked to you where you're not in the back of a truck.
Yeah, well, that happens. I haven't met you before, Mark, but I have been paying attention to you lately, and I'm really impressed with what you have to say. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah, so I actually worked as a power line construction worker for a while. I was mostly setting poles, but you had to learn a little bit about theory and a little bit about the electrical grid and everything. And it seemed that the green energy people were very similar to the people who hijacked the war on drugs by trying to crush competition. It seems like the green energy push has been taken over and co-opted to stifle progress. And the fear campaign that's put out against nuclear energy is very similar to the fear campaign against hemp. And I was wondering if you've seen that parallel, and do you think that's mostly from lobbying, or do you think people are just brainwashed, or where does that mostly come from?
So it's kind of yes, is the bit, the easy, all that is kind of is involved. I would say that so Greenpeace was primarily about to start out as an anti-nuclear weapons movement, and then when the strategic arms reduction treaties came into effect, the nations started reducing their stockpiles. Overall, South Africa gave up nuclear weapons, and nuclear weapons just kind of became a non-issue. They needed a new enemy to fight. And the word nuclear, and they had done a bunch of research into nuclear weapons, works very well when you talk about nuclear energy, right? And it's very easy when you say, well, a nuclear weapon has, I don't know the specifics of it, even though I've slept between nuclear weapons for years of my life on nuclear ballistic missile submarines. But, let's say there's 20 kilograms of uranium to make, or plutonium to make a nuclear weapon. Well, you've got 80,000 kilograms sitting in a nuclear reactor, right? And that's a huge amount of weight. And so they do their calculation. Go, well, I remember them talking about millstone up in New England, seeing when I was stationed out in Bangor, Washington, Ground Zero was this company. They worked this anti-nuclear advocacy group, and they used the reactor in Millstone as an example. And they said there's 2 units online at Millstone, and they used this example, and they said if you were to detonate all the nuclear material in Millstone, it would blow up basically all of New England. Well, that would be true if you had a giant plutonium bomb with the right configuration and, put this all into, this perfect situation, which, oh, by the way, it's only 1% plutonium. So now you're reduced by 1%. Oh, wait, that plutonium isn't even bomb capable. Oh, wait, it's separated out. So they use a lot of that fear mongering. So you have the Greenpeace Act aspect of it. And then you have the oil and gas industry that has lobbied hard against nuclear because nuclear really is this extremely, abundant energy. When you look at how much, I use, having gone up to some coal plants, right? They've got these giant boilers that are the size of turbine buildings for nuclear plants, and they produce half the power output of a nuclear plant. Right? You have a boiler that's bigger than a turbine building, right? An actual nuclear reactor is physically very small. I mean, there are oil tanks at at the plant I work at that are there for there's 6 combustion turbines that are there for peak power production. Those 6 combustion turbines combined 268 megawatts to the grid. Each of the nuclear power, there's 2 nuclear power plants at that site, 2 reactors, they each put 820 megawatts to the grid. The fuel containers are bigger than the containments that contain the reactor. So you've got the reactor vessel, the fuel, everything in there. So when you look at that, oil and gas is this, they by size use a larger footprint, and then you're talking about transporting fuel. I mean, a nuclear reactor, you put in 18 months of fuel. The coal for a coal plant is, they start mining it 6 months before it's burned, right? But a nuclear power plant's fuel lasts for 18 months, 2 years, depending on your plant configuration. Or if you're looking at a U.S. submarine, U.S. vessel, I like lifting it up. You got that submarine behind me. Its reactor lasts for 33 years off 1 fuel loading. So, like,
I'm sorry. Wait, stop. Apologies for interrupting. 33 years on one refueling.
Yep. They never refuel. You put that.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah. And USS Washington was the 14th Virginia class submarine too. So wow. And then the aircraft carriers, their fuel lasts for 25 years. And then when you go with the Aurora by Oklo, because they're using a breeding system, meaning that they're taking.
He's a big fan of that company. I think he might be.
I'm a huge fan. No, I'm not. I've invested no money.
But he is an investor in Dogecoin because he's going full ANCAP on us. Like that's happening.
Oh my! Yeah, I made $10,000 off Dogecoin in the last
48 hours. I hate when you guys talk about.
No, you didn't. That's not true.
But
I mean, I hope it is because I made a bunch on Dogecoin.
Stop it! The poor here is crying. But
my bad.
To back.
I forget that we have the poors, Mark. We have to be nice to them.
Yeah, but to piggyback on what Mark was saying though, if you go to the
3,000, shit, he did.
Oh my God. if you go to the 90s and early 2000s, like anti-nuclear protests, you will notice a nuclear bomb explosion on every single flyer, on every single shirt, which is supposed to be an anti-nuclear energy thing, but they have the nuclear bomb on it. So it's like that was very, very deliberate in terms of that part of it. And then on other ends of it, you kind of see to where a lot of these protests were directly funded by gas companies, and they didn't even hide it. It would openly be like, stop the bomb, sponsored by Exxon. And it was like, wow, they're shameless about it.
Right.
Well, when I go into the airport in Norfolk, there's BP with their wind turbines. BP is not a renewable energy company. Let's be honest about that. They want to freaking pump the freaking, the dinosaur liquid, the dinosaur oil out, and then want to freaking burn it, in ships and all that, right? And these are smart companies. They're not dumb. And I don't, they're using the government to their advantage, right? I just wish that my industry would go, hey, let's use it to our advantage. I mean, I would love for every
show
power
ducks
plant
covered in oil and go nuclear safer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, well, did you know that the U.S. nuclear industry is credited with saving the American crocodile in Florida?
I did not know that. Apparently, Magnus did.
Turkey,
I'm going to pop out for
just
a second and let you guys discuss. I got to take care of something real quick.
Because I have an opposite story of that, to where in Michigan they closed down our power plant in like I think it was the early 2000s, late 90s, something like that. And you used to be able to swim in the Detroit River, but ever since they shut down that power plant, they had to open all of these coal and gas facilities in the area that's called downriver. And it has polluted the river so much that you can't swim in that. And it's gotten actually so bad that one of my friends who went to University of Michigan, they had a school test, like a school road, like field trip, I guess the word for it, to where they took samples of the Detroit River. And one of them found an unidentified biological organism in the Detroit River because it was that polluted. So it was literally people were nuclear, not causing mutations in the river, but like a decade of coal burning and oil building and dumping into the river had caused mutations. And it didn't used to be that way when we had the nuclear plant up in Midland, and they closed that down, and the environment's like rapidly degraded since then. So like you have I've heard the crocodile story, and then that's the opposite side of it of like, we need to save the planet by like, if you drive from Toledo to Detroit, both sides of the freeway are just like fire into the sky, like coal and oil plants, where it's just burning into the atmosphere. Like if you've drove through there, you've seen it. And that was to save the planet.
Yeah, well, it is fascinating, and it amazes me how much the wind and solar lobbyists, the Green New Dealers, don't understand. And we're going to use battery backup, and I'm like, and I love. There's this great chart that talks about the levelized cost of energy that goes down, and they show these charts. It shows it in dollars per megawatt hour for wind and solar, and then for batteries, it's in dollars per kilowatt hour. So it's 1,000 times more costly for batteries. Right?
Because a lot of resources go into making those batteries, that a lot of minerals and stuff like that are not really accessible, and they're kind of just as hard to deal with as nuclear waste if you look at battery waste, but people don't really want to talk about that either.
Yeah. Well, so levelized cost of energy, which is actually it's an investment tool, not this is the cost of energy tool. But the levelized cost of energy for nuclear is 16 cents per megawatt hour, right? And then wind and solar are like 30, 35, something like that. Natural gas is like 14. They're down below nuclear. But batteries, like I saw this graph that said this is the best battery you'll ever get, which is $8 per megawatt hour. That's the best it's going to get, is $8. And we're talking 16 cents. They're telling me nuclear is too expensive. I'm like, do you know how much? And that battery is in addition to your wind and solar farm, right? I was, one of the comments I make is that with wind and solar, you get one power plant for the price of two. So whether you're building your battery backup, whether you're building, a nuclear backup, whatever your backup source of power is, that's in addition to building your wind and solar farm. And then, with that, now you're ramping up and down your unit. Do you know when you're talking oil and gas, that's when you're producing the most pollution, is when you're changing, your power level. All power plants like to operate at one power level. We don't like to ramp them. They don't like to ramp. We can do that with nuclear, but no power plant likes to ramp. That's just a function of equipment, right? Equipment likes to remain either off or on at a stable state. It'll run forever. You keep that pump running at 60 hertz, just continually running, but you ramp that thing down.
It's a real simple concept to understand, because just think of your car. Your car gets the best gas mileage when you're going a stable speed on the highway. So
yeah,
it's a real simple deal. Yeah.
So it's fascinating. I love talking about the energy dilution or the density when you're talking nuclear, right? So you compare Diablo Canyon to the solar farm they built out in Australia. Australia built a solar farm that produces 2 gigawatts of energy at peak power production, meaning that, from say noon to 2 p.m., it's producing 2 gigawatts of energy. Overall, it's averaging about 20% of that just throughout its life cycle. Because when the wind is down, it's not where the sun is down, it's not producing any. It takes 13,000 acres to produce those 2 gigawatts of energy. Diablo Canyon produces 2 gigawatts of energy in California on 13 acres.
Yep.
So think about how much you have to carpet. You're cutting down. You're like you said, killing. You're killing the habitat for turtles, for lizards, whatever, tortoises, snakes that are talking out in the desert. Like the desert is not without wildlife. It's actually very wildlife diverse. But if you're going to put a solar farm across a desert, you're destroying the habitat for all these. And there's environmentalists that are totally for green energy and for wind and solar, that they're like, all right, hey, we got to go transport all these turtles out of this freaking area. We're going to build a solar farm in. And they're like,
that was part of what happened with like the Bundy Ranch situation that a lot of people don't know about. And then also like people don't know that large solar farms increase the ambient like temperature around there, because you're essentially got these panels baking in the sun. They're giving off heat. They're attracting this. They're black, everything like that. And they've been known to disrupt like immediate local wildlife. On small scales, it's not a problem. If you have like 100 solar panels or whatever, it's not going to do it. But when you're talking, like you said, like 16 acres of solar farms, like it's cooking the wildlife, like literally in the immediate area, it's cooking the wildlife.
Oh my!
Well, and
even like in the worst example of nuclear, like if you look at like Chernobyl and stuff like that, it's not healthy wildlife.
Get Dave Smith on here too, Austin.
Right. But even with Chernobyl, like it's not healthy wildlife, but there's wildlife living there to where around like these solar farms and stuff like that, you see like total natural depopulation.
Did you know that in the exclusion zone around Chernobyl, that the cancer rates are the same as the rest of Europe?
Yeah, people are living there still.
No, amongst the wildlife. So the wildlife that are radioactive, right? There's still workers at Chernobyl, right? All 4 reactors are shut down, obviously, with the 4th one being blown up. And then units 5 and 6 were never completed. But I mean, and there are still workers there. And I've spoken with Ukrainian officials, and they want to build test reactors at Chernobyl. What a great place to do it, because we know we've had problems there. So if you have a problem, well, we've already screwed up this area. It's not like we're going to destroy Pripyat a second time.
Right.
But I mean, there's a church that's outside of Chernobyl where, the people living there are living there illegally, or they're going to this church illegally. And if you've ever seen, like it's Pandora's Promise, there's a guy walking around in the radiation, sitting in a plane, sitting in brick houses, like all these places. And the lowest place he shows is the church outside of Chernobyl. Like it's like 2 microsieverts. The plane was like 25. So you've got like 12 and a half times radiation flying to Chernobyl, a radiation dose, than you would be, sitting in church. Like,
the river monster guy went and like caught like irradiated catfish out in Chernobyl. Even like
I saw that one.
That's a surreal episode. But yeah, like it's definitely overblown. It's definitely fearmongered. There's some anti-Soviet propaganda, because like I feel like we leaned so hard into getting one up on the Soviets over Chernobyl that we accidentally like shot ourselves in the foot with nuclear. Besides France, which like
we did, and we're going to come to that, but we also obviously, you guys can see we have a new questioner here. John here decided he would do the incredibly stupid thing of running for Congress as a libertarian in Utah, where he lost to a nearly dead NFL former player. So, what's up, John? This is Mark, and Mark is
cut him out
very
like
smart.
That. I love jumping in and having you guys get cut off mid-sentence. It's great. How's everybody?
John, are you still in Utah, or have you
the
left
show
yet?
is called Derailed. We just do what we want here.
No, that's what we're going to do. So I guess we're just going to jump in with my question then.
Yeah.
I know we were talking about or you guys were talking a lot about environmental impact as far as like the sites go between solar and nuclear facilities, but I was wondering a bit about the mining environmental impacts, because, we talk a lot, at least in the car community, about, mining for oil versus mining for lithium and things like that for these electric battery packs. But what about nuclear compared to all the mining activities as far as it goes for lithium and everything else that goes into these batteries? How much of a bigger environmental impact do those have against nuclear?
So I'm not an expert in mining, so I'm not super smart on it. But it's interesting is that so uranium, when you mine it, is actually in a form of, it's called U3O8. U3O8, if you ingested it, your body would basically just have a really heavy bowel movement. Your body can't absorb it, and then it is an alpha emitter. So it's uranium when occurs naturally is so what is it? It's 99.3% uranium-238 and then 0.7% uranium-235. Both those emit alpha particles, and alpha particles a helium nucleus, right? And so helium will not penetrate the dead layer of skin on the outside of your body, right? So if you were to swallow a bunch of uranium or inhale it even, your body's not going to absorb it, but it's going to release those alpha particles in your body. The mucus layer in your lungs and in your digestive tract is going to block those. And then you're going to basically have, helium burps, and you're going to exhale helium is all that's going to happen, because it's going to absorb electrons and then become helium gas. So from a perspective of, safety from mining, it's not a problem. Now, the problem when you get with uranium mines is that you're mining other elements typically that are associated, that are nearby those deposits. So vanadium, which is a heavy metal, which your body absorbs, stores it, and I believe your liver, and it causes problems. And so again, it's that association. We have a uranium mine, but we're not mining just uranium. We're mining these other minerals there, and those minerals are the problem. But you see it with the lithium mines, how damaging lithium mines are to the environment. Interesting fact.
They mostly do just strip mining with lithium, right? Like they just bulldoze the earth all the way down. They don't even try to be delicate with it.
I'm not an expert in lithium.
I've seen the pictures, and it'll make, if you like trees, don't look up lithium mines, because you'll be really sad. You'll be really sad.
Interesting fact. Did you know that lithium is a byproduct of pressurized water reactors in the United States?
Interesting. So, I did not know that. What? Hang on. What?
Yeah. So to control the nuclear reaction, maintain the temperature in the reactor. So in the Navy reactors and in boiling water reactors, you control your reaction using control rods, and in pressurized water reactors, you control it using boric acid. It's called chemical shimming. And boric acid, when it absorbs a neutron, the boron becomes boron 11, then splits into a lithium atom and a helium atom. So basically, you're converting boron into lithium into helium. So as a byproduct, you could produce lithium from nuclear energy.
So you could build more green solar by using this form of nuclear. You just gave me a new weapon. I'm gonna drop that all the time. Thank you.
and so, give you an idea, when we do an outage, we use tons of boric acid at the plant I work at. And I mean, literally one day I dropped, and we joked that we have a thing called the gas stripper. So, at my work, we get to warm up the stripper and drop a ton of acid. I literally filled up a tank with 1 ton of boric acid, like throughout the entire 12-hour shift. I literally lifted 2,000 pounds of boric acid in 55-pound bags over a 12-hour period. Put it in a tank.
An attractive wife.
So we have our jokes about that, but literally, as a byproduct, now the viability of harvesting that, I don't know. Oh,
well, that's something we could look into, though, right? Like maybe some technology down the line that might make it's an angle.
Here's something else in the nuclear industry. What's the other element that goes into batteries that we're in scarcity of? Cobalt. Did you know nuclear power plants produce cobalt as a waste product too?
Hey, isn't that actually kind of a good thing, since we have a bunch of little slave children in the Congo that are mining that?
Yeah. Now
seems like that's pretty good for the maybe not have slaves.
We're converting iron-59 into cobalt-60. Cobalt-60 is actually our major contributor of radiation, but after 20 years, it's no longer radioactive. So I could produce, I could extract cobalt, store it, it emits radiation. Now I've got cobalt that I could use for other purposes. Now, the amount of quantity, it could be very small, but you look at the different processes you could do.
Yeah, I mean, I come from the native perspective of like, if we can get anything out of it, it's good, right? Like you use everything down to the bones.
Well, and that's fascinating when you look at nuclear energy, right? Right now in U.S. reactors, we consume less than 5%. It's probably more like 3% of the energy in the fuel. Right, we enrich up to 4.99% uranium-235. Right, so it was 99.3% U-238, and then 0.7% uranium-235. We make it increase the uranium-235 up to 5% in that, and that's what we consume as our fuel. But we can convert that remaining uranium into plutonium and use that in a fast reactor. Right, examples of that. X-Energy's got a design. I mean, any of your molten salt reactors, the BN-800 in Russia, that's what they use as their fuel, is that they use spent nuclear fuel, and they have a reactor that puts 880 megawatts out into the grid that's literally runs off of nuclear waste. So we know we can do this. We're proving we can do it, right? So why not use this waste? Everyone talks about the waste. But then when you get done with your waste stream, so this is the analogy I use, is that let's say I develop a reactor that's used fast spectrum and is going to consume 100% of the fuel. As opposed to right now, we're consuming between 2 to 4% of it. So now I've consumed 100% of it, right? So immediately I could take 60% of that waste and it's not radioactive, completely gone. Within 5 years, another 20% is gone. And then we have things we can use with it that are used for industrial applications and used for medical applications, right? Have you ever heard of a barium treatment, right? You take barium down, take barium, they're using this radioactive isotope. By the way, you're going to get a radiation dose that is more than I got in a year for that. By the way,
he's bringing out the papers.
Here's my official NRC record. In 2020, I received 145 milligram radiation. You get a barium treatment, you're probably going to get 200 or 300 milligram. You get a CT scan, it's 1,000 for the baseline, up to 10,000 milligram. So I mean, huge amounts of radiation occur. But one of the things talking about the recycling is they're developing nuclear batteries where they're basically going to create a nuclear diamond out of this waste, and then some kind of like solar, photovoltaic to create electricity off of the radiation as it's emitted to power things, and those batteries are going to last for 300 years. Right? Imagine like, I'm going to go stick the battery in my phone, and I don't have to reach. You need to charge that? Yeah, not till 23, 21.
Nice. We are going to attempt to switch gears for just a minute. I don't know that it'll work, but we're gonna try it because I have all the right guys on this show right now to do this thing. So.
Don't bring up the porn thing.
We leave John's porn obsession alone on shows that are this important.
This is serious business,
we're talking
gentlemen.
about the future. So,
sorry, John, we never speaking that.
Sorry, John, didn't mean to call you out.
So ask me about the Bama Man later, the Alabama Man. You got to ask me about that because it's going to be related, and you're going to love it.
Okay, maybe I guess
Nuclear Diamond
can
is
see
a
the
good punk
future.
Rock name.
That is a great punk rock name. I like that.
That's
okay. Well, you obviously, Mark, want to talk about that. Let's do that, I guess, first, and then we'll ask my question. Right. So let's talk about that first.
So there's a in the Navy, you have all these label plates on your panels in the engine rooms, aircraft carriers and submarines. So as a joke or as a fun thing, guys will hide pornographic pictures behind them.
We would never do that in the military, Mark. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, we would never draw in the bathrooms with Sharpies.
No.
On
No.
the USS Alabama, on the electric plant control panel, there's a label plate that describes how to operate the ground detector to measure for ground, electrical grounds on the ship. When you take off that label plate, there's a picture of a dude with like the worst 80s porn stash ever, right? Like terrible, right? And he's with this woman that she's completely exposed, right?
Well endowed.
The terrible tan lines sagging a little bit, right? And
the good old 80s stuff.
Yeah, and she's giving him a hand job, right? In this picture. But he's wearing a red USS Alabama ball cap on it.
Oh God! No, because my cousin was deployed to Afghanistan, and people do not understand how degenerate the military is.
3 of us in this chat do understand it.
Like you just to put it in context for people, you have mostly young, early 20s men that have nothing to do for hours. Okay, and there's no women around.
So I once made a garden while on watch on one of my submarines out of block wire, right? Just a thin strip of wire. I mean, I had tulips and roses, and I had a spider web, and I had bugs.
Oh, I'm sure submarine board is a whole nother level of board that no one can appreciate. Like, what's the nickname for
giant ocean dildo? And now they're just rolling. There's no way this ends well.
Oh, God. Okay, because you got your question, Archaic. I definitely want to ask about France.
Oh,
I have a thing. So we'll do your thing, and then I want to know about
France.
Well,
I don't know what your question is. So mine's probably long-winded, or his answer may be long-winded. So maybe we do yours first. I don't know what you got going.
I just want to know, because I often talk about Switzerland, of how Switzerland has a really weird political model, and nobody talks about it.
Rebuilt on us.
So why does nobody talk about France and essentially their entire country running on nuclear power with no meltdowns, no issues, no drama, and they even run the Large Hadron Collider off of it, which is crazy amounts of energy, and just nobody talks about France. So
it's fascinating. So the great comparison is France versus Germany, right? At the same size population, and France is 70% nuclear, like 25%. Hydro, and they're like 5% others. So extremely, non-polluting energy grid as a whole. And by the way, their electricity prices are half of Germany's. And Germany's finding out, as Germany's one of the highest polluting nations in Europe. And they're finding out that it gets worse as they shut down more nuclear plants, right? And they are absolutely, in this anti-nuclear. Now, I think that somewhat is that their lobbying group, because they're getting all their oil from Russia. So whatever group is,
Gazprom and all that.
Yeah. So they're trying to get their oil from Russia. So it's fascinating. But you bring up a great point. And did you know that of the 8 commercial reactor meltdowns on the planet, France had 2 of them, and both those reactors are still operating today.
Yeah, nobody ever. I mean, I didn't even hear about that. So if I didn't hear about that, and I'm a big nuclear geek, then I guarantee if I go out on the street, nobody's heard of that. People know. A lot of people don't even know about 3 Mile Island, and 3 Mile Island's really overblown. Like the amount the 3 Mile Island disaster was a disaster. Like, not really. Yeah. Like, not much. Nothing really awful happened. Like, it was still unfortunate, but it wasn't this. They try to sell it as like a Chernobyl 2 when it was not even in the same ballpark.
We destroyed a brand new reactor. I mean, that's a problem. I mean, they probably could have pulled the fuel out of it and then restarted it. Let's be honest, they could have done that, and it would have taken years of cleanup. It could have remained operating. I really do believe they could have done that. But I mean, there have been 8 commercial meltdowns. And I say commercial, I meaning non-test reactors, right? So I don't consider the EBR-1 meltdown, the San Susanna meltdown. Any of the military meltdowns don't qualify because they were not designed around power production. They were designed around testing some, crazy form of energy, some weird thing, right? But the 8 meltdowns, Fukushima counts for 3 of them. Chernobyl, 3 Mile, and I don't remember the additional Russian reactor that melted down and still operating, in the 2 in France. So literally you have reactors that are still operating to this day that had meltdowns. All a meltdown means is that you lost control of your fuel. Your fuel didn't remain a solid. It got hot enough to become liquefied. That's it. And one of France's meltdowns is that they had two fuel assemblies next together, and they got hot enough to where they basically welded to each other. That was it. That was the entire meltdown. Oh, these two fuel assemblies stuck together. So.
Oh, hi, Stacia.
So that's interesting, and I like that you brought that up, because one of the things that I know growing up was a lot of people, I guess Magnus is also quite a bit younger than me, would always consistently bring up is, well, nuclear is dangerous because of 3 Mile Island. But I'm like, well, who died? Like, what are we talking about here?
Bam Margera and Steve-O and all of them went and camped on 3 Mile Island, and it was on MTV.
They did. I remember that.
Everyone forgets about that, but they literally got in canoes and went and camped on 3 Mile Island. It's overblown as hell.
But before we get to Stacia here, who is our newest guest here,
my favorite lady,
Mark,
welcome, Stacia.
You mentioned that America had its own Chernobyl, and I think that more people don't know about that than don't know about 3 Mile Island. Can you just catch us back up on that?
So there was a reactor called SL1, which was an Army reactor, 1961 out in Idaho, that we literally exploded and destroyed an entire reactor that killed 3 people. Now, when you have to understand how early this is in nuclear history, is that, we're talking so early that you have control rods to control the nuclear reaction. They were hand cranking these things. We use switches today to, operate. They were hand cranking.
Talk about a bad job.
Yeah. So we're going to get to how bad of a job it was. I'm not done yet. So the operator that was withdrawing the control rods, whether he heard 3 or 13 inches withdrawal, they're not sure, but he withdrew the rods. It developed what's known as prompt critical, which is, a terrible thing in the nuclear industry. And basically it overheated the water it's a boiling water reactor, overheated it, tried to flash all the water to steam, which is exactly what happened in Chernobyl. You ever take a sealed container and you boil water in it, it explodes? That's exactly what happened. And it exploded, and the operator was operating the control rod. It took 3 days to find him because he was literally pinned to the ceiling.
Wow.
Go look it up.
I've never heard of this before. And if it was, again, this ain't like I'm not a simp for the Soviets at all. The Soviets were awful people, but we hear about Chernobyl to this day. We're still making documentaries about it and everything. But I didn't even know about this happening in Idaho, and just as bad.
Government sanctioned cover by Admiral Hyman G. Rickover, the father of the nuclear Navy.
Which leads us to the question that I wanted to ask.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
It kind of worked out. But before we get there, Stacia had a very great question that she wanted to ask. She's we're turning her. She's gonna eventually be straight up
admit to being an anarchist already, Stacia. Me and her had a debate.
She'll admit it eventually. But she had a great question for you, Mark, and so we'll give the floor to Stacia.
Oh, before that, can I ask something about? Sorry to change.
Honey, you have the floor. You can ask whatever you want.
Okay. So I was.
And by the way, yes, I am wearing sheath underwear.
Let me consult the bylaws about this. I'm confused. But go for it, Stacia.
So when you started talking about 3 Mile Island, I've never heard of that, but it just came up in a Google search because I was trying to find a film that was now I'm thinking it was a propaganda film. It's called The China Syndrome.
I love it. No, this is a great question.
Look, before Mark, because Mark probably has more details than I do. Just look at who's accredited for funding that film.
That's my only exposure to nuclear power, and so when Arcaicskidz started talking to me about nuclear power, I was like, sounds dangerous. I don't know. And yeah, so that was my only exposure to it, and it's I guess like a quick summary. It's this film about this journalist who's looking into alternative energy, and she goes to film at this nuclear power plant, and she witnesses an accident, and it seems like the plant was maybe about to explode, and she's like trying to warn the public, but then she keeps being blocked. It becomes this big conspiracy. Yeah, and so it really paints it as like nuclear is like, you get the sense that it's on the verge of exploding. Like, we're on the verge of
that's called
a nuclear
propaganda.
Bomb. Now I realize that.
And before Mark goes into it, you can correct me on this. Is either an MRI machine or a CAT scan? Which one is it? Yeah, so a CT scan actually used to be an NCT scan, but they took the nuclear out of it. It's still the same machine, but they took the word nuclear out of it because there was that much fear mongering and propaganda. So when you actually go get a CT scan, you are getting an NCT scan, but spooky nuclear.
What?
That's how preposterous it is.
Wow. This is an amazing question, Stacia. I love it. All right. So first off, the China Syndrome came out the same month as the 3 Mile Island accident occurred.
Exactly.
It hit the theaters, and it looked prescient because it hit the theaters the beginning of the month, and the 3 Mile accident occurred at the end of the month in 1979. So that was the superpower of those two.
Red flag. No.
Conspiracy.
So, but I mean, now I will tell you, in the 70s and 80s, we in the industry call it the Wild Wild West. Nuclear was not in a good place, right? 3 Mile Island was not the worst nuclear plant out there. It was the one that actually melted down, though. And then after that, the nuclear industry, said, hey, we've got to fix this. And so they created as a whole an organization called the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, industry funded, right? So this is not taxpayer funded. The industry pays for this, and they go around and they do inspections of all the plants, and they grade all the plants. And so you have all these different, plants that are being graded, different utilities, right? You've got Exelon, they own 3 Mile Island. Then you've got Dominion, which owns, say, the plant at North Anna and the one up in Millstone. And then you've got, say, Florida Power Light that owns Turkey Point. And you've got all these different, or Entergy, all these different companies. And they make up these audit teams. And they're providing grades for these different plants, and INPO releases these grades. So, and it's by reactor. So you might have, say, North Anna Unit 1, right? North Anna Unit 2. They may have completely different grades. There's 16 categories of grade. But these audit teams come in, and they're a joint audit team of all these different utilities, right? What? So if you're an Exelon company and you want your reactors to have high grades, do you think you're going to, go into North Anna, which Dominion owns, and give them a good grade if they don't deserve it? No. You're going to sit there and beat the living crap out of them, and you're going to
burning my competition to the ground.
Yeah, that's a New York housing inspector where he makes it to where you can't build your building because your fire alarm is 2 inches too close to the wall or something like that.
And that's the level that they got because of that. But that question about 3 Mile Island, now, we've talked about it, people camping on it and all that. So the public in Harrisburg that were surrounding that over, from 1979 to 1980, that year, they received 3.2 millirem due to the accident. All right. Now, that number doesn't mean anything to you until I give this. You've been to the dentist recently, I'm sure, right? Mm-hmm. How many x-rays did they give you at the dentist?
3 or 4.
Okay. That's 9 to 12 millirem.
Oh, okay.
Right? That CT scan that Magnus talked about, if you have a base CT scan, it's 1,000 millirem.
What?
Yeah, don't you feel comfortable when they put the big lead vest on you and then run behind the wall?
Right?
It's perfectly safe as he dies behind cover.
Nice.
So I've been in the nuclear industry for 23 years, and my exposure from nuclear power is only 500 millirem over 23 years. But my daughter, she has some medical issues. She's had 2 CT scans for bowel obstructions, and she's received 2,000 millirem from, these
Wait.
tests.
Let's unpack that a little. So you slept next to a nuclear reactor on an ocean dildo, otherwise known as a submarine.
I slept next to four different reactors.
Yeah, okay, whatever. And your lifetime exposure is lower than your daughter's?
Yes.
Okay, so that should calm everyone down.
I'm also assuming, though, because you work in the industry, you probably get on a lot of airplanes, and your daughter's probably not getting on a lot of airplanes. So, like, what is, that probably also factors in a little bit to lifetime exposure.
Well, now.
So how much can we even accredit to the nuclear? How much is you being on planes all the time? That's another thing.
Or living in a brick house.
So all my exposure is measured. Now, I will say that the first half of my naval career, our dosimetry didn't discriminate between natural and nuclear reactor generated radiation. In fact, they're called TLDs, thermoluminescent dosimeters. My TLDs, when I was in port, would read 9 millirem per month with the reactor shut down and me not going in the reactor compartment, getting towards radiation fields, right? I was in non-radiation areas. There was not radiation fields, but I received 9 millirem a month. Underway, sitting as close to the reactor as you could in, outside the reactor compartment, I would receive 4 a month, right? So I'm laughing at the comment there, but so I received almost double the amount from natural sources.
Yeah.
Now in your life, the average person gets somewhere between 150 and 250 milligram a year for natural sources.
John gets more because of the porn.
I'm never going to be able to run for political office ever again.
In Fukushima, they're talking about tritium, which they're getting ready to release a bunch of water, which has been filtered out for the really nasty stuff. And China and Russia are complaining about tritium, right? Tritium is just a form of hydrogen. Hydrogen, 2 hydrogen atoms bonding with an oxygen atom produces water. Guess what? Tritium is also produced in the upper atmosphere, and when it rains, you're literally having tritium rain on you.
Oh no, right? We're all going to die.
Yes. So I'm going to drink radioactive liquid right now in front of you.
Okay.
I guess because people brought it up a few times. This is totally outside my realm of expertise. I know about like regular reactors. I know about fuel rod reactors, everything. What are thorium salt reactors and why?
We're not going there yet. Not yet.
I want to know so bad.
No, I know you do, but we're not going there yet.
I do have to leave.
No.
Okay.
We have one question that we're going to talk about first because it's fun. Especially for a bunch of libertarians and Stacia and Mark. So multiple governments around the country, including our own government, have done a huge amount of nuclear weapons tests. And then they disappeared the cities. Like, oh, no, that never happened. We don't know what you're talking about. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about Anaconda, New Mexico, that apparently never existed. Although my mother-in-law, her actual hospital birth certificate says where she was born. And now if she tries to get her birth certificate, it says, oh, you were born in Grants. It's like, no, she wasn't. Like, that's not real. And they're like, no, Anaconda never existed. Yes, it did. So I want to talk about the fact that governments did terrible testing and terrible crap, and then now they're trying to play cover-up.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We talked about the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union has their own version of Anaconda. I can't remember the name of the town. It's something 50, City 50, I think.
I think it was like Kolevsky. It was K something. That also was the same place where they dumped a bunch of,
was that what it was called?
Something like that. They also dumped like a crap ton of radioactive waste into like a lake and just said like, not our problem anymore.
Yeah, never happened.
So we talk about the animosity that existed between the former Soviet Union and the United States. The United States helped cover up the fact that Russia disappeared a freaking city.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Like we were involved in that. Now I'm not an expert in all this stuff, and you, fortunately, Archaic had given me a heads up that he was going to ask me this question. But I was looking at the Anaconda. There was a bunch of mining going there, and it was vanadium mining that I think was the real problem. Where they were basically, just getting everyone sick with these heavy metals. And then I was talking about there's a city in Colorado where it was a lead town where they were mining lead.
It's called Leadville, Colorado. I'm not even kidding.
And they have like some of the highest lead levels in their soil. And so the EPA is like, we're going to go take the top 12 inches of your soil. All the citizens have to leave. But they tested every citizen in the city, and they had the lowest lead concentration in the was red, and the staplers in the control room were black. So someone thought it was funny to have the red stapler from Office Space, and the utility got fined a bunch of money because their stapler was red in the simulator because it was funny.
See, Stacia, I don't even have to debate anarchism with you. I just have to have you listen to people that have to live through government regulation, and the government will convince you yourself.
Well, I was noticing earlier when he brought up that they made their own regulatory body, that's totally privatized. I was like, shit, that ruins my question already.
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask.
Because our whole conversation on anarchism is like, well, what are we going to do with the government? Are these places just going to regulate themselves? And it's like,
exactly. Well,
yeah, kind of.
Everyone wants to see how ridiculous regulation is. Just serve in the military,
or be a trucker, or be involved in the nuclear industry, or be involved in
basically
logging.
Do anything that puts you in a position where you have to run into a government agency.
People that could use dairy products, but they had to throw it out all on the ground because of regulation.
Hey, can I go take a 5-minute break to go?
Of course you can. We'll just sit here and talk crap about the government while you do that.
I actually need to run to the store before it closes. So if you guys are still going by the time I get back, cool. But I will.
Yeah, no problem, man. Your shit'll stay open. So if you want to jump back in, cool.
Cool.
Otherwise, I'll let John or Stacia take over.
I was going to say, take us to the store with you.
You should. Just switch it to your phone. I mean, I have no idea how you would do that. What up, John? John, this is Stacia. Stacia, this is John.
Nice to meet you.
John ran for Congress, and then he said that porn should be legal, and Utah said no, it shouldn't.
Oh, really?
I'm just kidding.
So much.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
When I try and run again, if I do, I'm just saying.
Well, that's better than
you got your back, dude.
I thought maybe you had a scandal where they found out you'd been filming porn or something like that. So if that's all it is, that's not bad.
No, there's this fun thing where after the election, I decided I was going to move to Florida, and as soon as I said, okay, I'm going to move to Florida, Utah was like, we're banning porn. And so now it's this running joke between Reed and everybody else of, oh, he's moving because of porn. Of course, the state legislature couldn't just leave things alone until I left. They had to just step it up to make me look bad.
That's
what I get
funny.
being an atheist trying to run in a Mormon state. So.
Oh, that's funny. Maybe when Mark comes back, we'll talk about thorium to just calm a couple people down.
Yeah,
I don't know. So you, John, I did want to ask you this. You're coming from it from a policy kind of point of view of you were going to run for one of those guys that was going to do that thing. What are your thoughts on this situation?
On nuclear as a whole?
Yeah, what would you like to see happen in that? Hey, welcome back, Mark.
No, thanks.
So, personally, I'd like to see nuclear more embraced. I think it's a much better alternative. One of the things that I really struggle with when we're talking about energy is, it always gets blamed on oil and gas and the cars and everything else like that. Whereas in Utah, 67% of our state's electricity and power comes from coal. So in Utah, we deal a lot with, our air quality is horrible in Utah. It's talked about nonstop. We have this air quality issue, yada, yada, yada. And it's always blamed on people like me who have a Camaro with the resonator cut out and the full axle back exhaust, and I've got intake mods done as well. Like, I'm full bolt on Camaro. So I'm the one that everybody blames for the whole air quality out here. Okay.
Mm.
But at the same time, 67% of our power grid comes from coal. So as far as like how energy comes, I think nuclear is a much better alternative, especially in comparison to things like coal, which are one of the worst polluting energy sources that you can have. I mean, that's a lot of why you have issues in places like Mongolia or China and things like that.
Well, that, and I want to charge my Tesla with nuclear power.
Yeah. John, you bring up a great point. And so one of the things that a coal plant operates is that they use a heat engine, right? So it's not like, your gasoline engine, which, efficiency gets up to 70, 80% with those. A heat engine, using the Carnot heat cycle, can only at best get 40%. Nuclear uses that same principle. We just don't produce CO2 and other emissions as part of it, right? We're a zero emission energy source. So, when you're looking at it, you're basically wasting 2/3 of your energy producing this. So you have to use a lot more fuel to make a coal plant work. Whereas if you switch to natural gas, which is a cleaner burning, and you probably don't use a boiler, but you use like a combined cycle turbine. Now you're basically using combustion as using a combustion engine as opposed to a heat engine, where you just instead of boiling water, you're basically like a car, right? You're developing some kind of engine in that manner. You're more efficient, so you're not using as much fuel, not producing as much pollution. So that's one of the benefits of switching away from coal. Period. But that coal lobby is a big lobby, and coal is actually, by profit though, coal is very, very non-profitable by comparison, right? If you look at the profit margins for power generation, I could speak Virginia because that's where I live. Nuclear has an 11% or 11 cent per megawatt hour generated profit margin. Natural gas is 7 cents. Coal is for wind and solar only make money because the government pays them to make it.
Right.
So when you're looking at that and you go, it's financially it would be better for Utah to just switch to natural gas, right? If they don't want to build nuclear. Now, fortunately, the UAMPS project, which is being built in Idaho doesn't need a 900 megawatt facility for power production. There's just not enough power needed. So most of the towns that are signed onto the UAMPS project are actually in Utah. So, and that's the next nuclear power station that's being licensed to be built, is the new scale 12 units, each unit 77 megawatts, small modular reactor facility. It's going to be built in Idaho. So it's in license. The design is licensed, and they're in licensing for construction.
Well, that's
I have a question that I got to throw in here right quick. It's from Kevin Hobby, who is the new LP chair for the state of Oklahoma. And he wants to know, congratulations, Kevin. You're badass, and I love you. He wants to know what the realistic future of us going full nuclear is. Like, where are we looking? Like, what's our timeline?
So right now the timeline is that by the end of this decade, we are going to have the Army's microreactor program is going to be online. They've got 3 designs that are currently being bid. So the Army's going full nuclear with these mobile reactors, going to basically be able to fly in for forward operating bases, used for emergency situations like hurricane rolls through, takes out Puerto Rico. They could use C-17s fly in these microreactors. You got NuScale is going to be building by the end of the decade. It's like 2027. They're supposed to be online. Oklo will have their reactor. You've got Oak Ridge has been licensed to build advanced test reactors as well. They're just looking for companies to do that. I believe TerraPower is a leader for that. 4 provinces in Canada have signed on to small modular reactors. So Canada and the U.S.
the newest police state.
So nuclear is now. It's one of those where we've got to get the future going. Now, in the immediate future, at the end of this year, the Vogtle Unit 3, which is the only Vogtle's the only facility with nuclear under construction. Unit 3 goes online. The first nuclear construction that began after the 1970s. to be completed and go online, with Unit 4 coming online the next year, which will make Vogtle Power Station the largest power station in the United States, surpassing Palo Verde with its 3 units. But once we get the ball rolling, it's one of those, like, you just got to get the momentum. Problem with nuclear, especially these large scale reactors, is that they're essentially 20 years before they're useful. And I say useful from a business perspective, right? Because you have to go through, you have to submit the license, go through a 3-year licensing process, but you got to do the prep work beforehand, right? So you got to submit your environmental impact statement. You got to figure out what design you're going to use, and then you get it licensed, and then you got to build it. They take about a decade to build in the United States, right?
Yeah, you're just making an argument against government, buddy.
But and then it takes 8 years for them to become profitable, right?
Yeah.
But you're profitable for at least 32 years because it's a 40-year license. Oh wait, we've just licensed reactors out to 80 years. The NRC is evaluating if we go to a century and beyond, right? But the problem is that what is the MBA model for every CEO? It's a 5-year plan, right? Nuclear is a 20-year plan that's going to be good for 100. No CEO cares about that. And the problem is, and this is government again, right? When we had pensions were being paid, right? I, as a person receiving a pension, would want to make sure my company is going to remain around for a century, right? Because I might live that long, right? But when we got away from pensions,
unlikely, but sure.
Right, but I mean, but still, like, I want the pension. What if I'm the cradle robber at 85 and I marry a 20-year-old hottie, right? And she's gonna get half my pension from the day she dies, right? You know what I mean? Like I want something to take care of.
Stacia, he's talking about you, girl.
Right? So and it could be reversed too. It could be the other way around. I'm not saying, but when we went to the 401k, we as the public, became, we decided that now we care about how much your profit margin is each year. We want that CEO with a good 5-year plan. Oh yeah. Oh, that's a great one, Kitty Bass, Sasha. That is a great one.
We're going to come to that. We're going to come to that. But yeah, finish your thought there first.
But going in there, right, is the 401k basically put us as the investor in my 401k onto the CEO plan, the MBA plan of 5 years. So.
Yeah, and this one's for John first before we go.
Yeah.
Before we go to the next one.
I had my AirPods and I was.
My wife might kill me.
And I was like, if
it was with her, it's okay, right?
If John had been born in Utah, he would have won.
He would have won.
Yeah,
I will protect your porn industry.
All right, we're another sea story, another submarine story. One of the submariners I served with.
John was in the Navy too, Mark. Just so you know.
Wait, what?
No,
Army.
I'm sorry. He was Army intelligence. Fuck,
yeah,
I can never track all you people.
I wasn't part of the branch that surrenders our ships at the first sight of Iranian guard. Give me some credit here.
Ooh. Whatever, dude. I was a Marine. I'm better than both of you, so bite me.
Yeah.
What's your favorite flavor of crayon?
My ass rides in Navy equipment. Muscles required.
My ass rides in Navy equipment. You're basically cabs. The Navy is a cab to take Marines to war. That's what you are. Anyway, sorry. Carry on.
So I had this guy I served with. He was nuclear trained guy, and we pulled into Hawaii, and he was Mormon, and all the guys are going
Mike
out.
John.
He ends up in a strip club, and I'm like, we're sitting at the hotel waiting to be picked up afterwards. I'm like, did you wear your special underwear to protect you from the evil strippers? And he literally pulls up his shorts and shows his special freaking underwear that has the runes on it. So yes, John, if you would have been in porn, you would be the current representative in Utah in the United States.
I don't know if that would actually be good for America right now, because John would be like, "You're all a bunch of cunts." I guarantee it. He would say shit on the U.S. congressional floor that hasn't been said since the probably Revolutionary War.
It'd be like back when they were like stabbing each other in Congress, like in the Civil War.
I can see him like smacking someone in the face with a glove and be like, "You want to go outside? You want to go outside and handle this?"
Hey,
can we bring back rules? Like I have literally said on Twitter, if you're in the Libertarian Party and you got a problem with me, just challenge me to a fight at a convention. Like we can duke this out. Fuck Twitter.
Yeah, it's a straight up duel. Let's just do this thing. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
I mean, I'm from California. My life has been split between California and Utah. Like I'm from the wild, wild west. Let's bring back gun battles at the OK Corral. Let's go.
Well, I mean, those aren't the two best states to use for that argument, but okay. Like, we'll accept it, I suppose. And then we got Seisha over here who just like lives in California and then runs around the planet. So
trying to get away from
California. Like on a more serious note, I did have a question that I presented. What is our future? What is the Kevin Hobby had asked, like, where are we? Like, I mean, your personal opinion, right? I know we kind of talked about it, but are we 20 years out? Are we 30 years out? Is there a way that maybe the Libertarian Party can like turn this thing and start pushing it to where we get a lot more nuclear reactors, like a lot faster?
Well, and that's a lot of it comes with the designs, and that's where when you look at NuScale and Oakland, the two companies, they're about ready to make a huge push, right? The fact that NuScale's their power modules, they call it, is licensed for operation in the United States, and they're just getting a construction license, and they're going to factory build these things, right? So they're an SMR, small modular reactor, meaning the reactor's modular built. So I build the power unit in one location. I build, my steam turbine in a different location. I have, say, a condensate skid, and then I have my control systems. And then you build these in factories, and they're small to where then you ship them in. They do testing in the factory, then you connect it together, do your integrated plant testing, and you bring it online. So while you're building this stuff, you're literally building your facility, right? Your infrastructure at the site. And then the other thing with NuScale is that since their reactors are, they're using a large scale model as far as a 1,000 megawatt facility, but uses 12 reactors to do that. Instead of it taking 10 years to build before you get the first one online, with this modular construction, you might start your construction process, and then 3 years into it, you're putting your first reactor online. And then a year later, your next one. And so you're constantly adding reactors to the process. Based on what I'm seeing with what NuScale is doing, they're about to have, I think, about 200 units ordered between the U.S. and internationally. So, and that's in the next decade.
So it's looking up. It's looking like this might be something that is it's an opportunity that's looking up.
What does that do for mining though? Because my understanding is like a lot of the uranium miners aren't even mining right now. Like I know Denison Mines hasn't been mining for years.
Can I reach in here quick? I grew up in southeastern Utah. I own a ranch in southeastern Utah that's a little over 8,000 acres. Mark is probably familiar with the area of southeastern Utah I grew up in, which is San Juan County, which is very close to southwestern Colorado, which is where a huge amount of uranium comes out of. Mm-hmm. They mining is dead there now.
Yeah. Right. We have a huge stockpile of it, and it's not being used. I understand that part.
Yeah. That was one of the things Hillary was selling uranium for yellow cake. See, yellow cake. I wore the shirt.
So there's a whole bunch to unpack with all this right now, right?
Yeah,
So,
you get it, buddy.
So, U.S. is currently our nuclear fleet is powered by Russian nuclear weapons. So we have taken
Welcome to the conversation.
Old Russian uranium weapons, which is uranium U-235 for nuclear weapons has to be greater than 80% enriched.
Station and John, keep him talking. I'll be right back.
So they're down blending it to get it down to that 5% enrichment, and then throwing it into and then we're fueling our reactors with it. And then with the sale of that uranium, right? Because they have all the centrifuges that are operating. The U.S. has to get centrifuges back online so that we can enrich our uranium again. Because we've literally outsourced our ability to enrich uranium to the Russian government. And that's what the Uranium One scandal essentially becomes, is that we need to get this online. The U.S. is getting that process back online. My wife has had conversations with the guys that are in charge of bringing their centrifuges back online, or bringing new ones online. But so we lost that ability. So the ability to mine made no sense when basically we have our uranium provided to us in a pure form that we're going to downgrade it into something that's more useful. And when you get towards building all these reactors, so you're looking at NuScale is a smaller version of what we use today, just with more safety features involved, to where their risk of meltdown is essentially limited. And they're going to use the same fuel profile that we use right now. So when you get into 200 new units, that's going to increase the demand for uranium mining. That's going to mean that, hey, we got to look for uranium mining. By the way, planetary wide, if we were to transition to all our energy into light water reactors that run off of uranium-235, we somewhere have between 100 and 1,000 years of uranium available until we have to get into seawater extraction. And then when you get into the realm of fast breeder reactors, fast reactors, when you get into, say, the Oklo Aurora design, which they're going to come online around the same time as the NuScale model with their 1.5 megawatt reactor, and theirs can run on nuclear waste. The U.S. has about somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 years of energy already mined and ready for those reactors. You've definitely,
10,000.
Being at 10,000, yeah. And that's assuming we converted all our energy to nuclear, right? Because we have, we use less than 1% of the energy out of the uranium that we mine. So John, you were in the Army, right? You ever deal with tanks? They got depleted uranium rounds, right? Guess what? I could throw that in a fast reactor, convert that to plutonium, and I can extract the energy out of it, right? The waste from the enrichment process is depleted uranium, which is used as tank armor, used as shells and rounds and all that stuff. Well, now I have it already mined. I can utilize that, in these fast reactors. And then I can also utilize the nuclear waste because I need a seed. I need plutonium. So I need plutonium from either a nuclear weapon source or a spent nuclear fuel source, because there's plutonium is generated as part of the nuclear reaction to cause my reactor to operate.
Sorry, Magnus.
I was sitting there in the chat like, put me in, coach.
Sorry.
So yeah.
So what I wanted to say. So how long until we go and start harvesting sand out of Iraq and Afghanistan for depleted uranium rounds?
I shouldn't put him in, coach.
I mean, that's a great question, but I mean, the thing is that the U.S. has. I did the math, and I think right now we have. Here's the example I use. If I were to magically take a nuclear reactor in the United States that operates off light water fuel, and I were to magically transform it to a fast reactor, that reactor lasts normally about 4.5 years. It's going to last on that fuel. That fuel is going to last about 4.5 years. If I transition to a fast reactor, it's going to last like 2 centuries.
Wow.
See,
really?
This is where I start to see an issue with, having that demand for it, because I see it as a huge uphill battle, especially with the oil companies, because like you mentioned before, You know, a lot of the oil companies are in bed with renewable energies. I think ExxonMobil is actually the parent company of fuel cell, which is a hydrogen fuel cell technology.
You're not wrong on that. It's like legit. That's in paperwork. They are.
Yeah, and so
they own it.
That's where I'm seeing the big issue with nuclear and building that demand, is because you're going up against the oil companies who are creating or backing the renewable energy companies to try and keep that as the main topic, because just like anything else in this country and in the world, it's not about fixing the problem. It's about maintaining that flow of revenue.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. And that's the biggest thing that the nuclear industry has to face. And, you know, when you look at these advanced designs, you know, one of the things when you look at a 1.5 megawatt reactor, and I will constantly, you know, be a shill for, you know, the Aurora, the Oklo's Aurora, because of its size, right? I mean, there's just something about it. Like, I mean, and they were a company that I had no idea about when I started advocating for nuclear, and then they just suddenly showed up, and I was like, wait a minute, there's something different. Like, I was like, 1.5 megawatt, that's nothing. And then I start talking with the crypto guys, and I start talking with the cannabis guys, and I go, oh, that's perfect size, because their reactor requires no water, right? So currently, every design requires water in some capacity as a cooling medium. As you're using steam to turn a turbine. What makes their reactor different is it's, you know, their heat sink to cause they use a Brayton cycle, I believe is the term. I'm not smart about supercritical carbon dioxide, but instead of
where's the wife? Let's get her back. She's a nuclear engineer,
right?
Yeah. Well, and she created the SCO demonstrator for Newport News Shipbuilding. So they, instead of using steam to turn a turbine, they're using carbon dioxide to turn a turbine, right? So I can extract CO2, and now it's, you know, being used as, you know, this supercritical fluid. And then instead of using, you know, in your condenser, you got to condense your steam into water. This is fresh water. And so then you use, you know, the ocean treated sewage like they do out in Arizona, you know, rivers, lakes, you know, as your cooling medium. They just have a radiator like a car that's their cooling medium. So you have no water involved in their reactor at all. So,
which is where a lot of like the risk comes from with nuclear, right? Is the water, of what to do with the water having issues, stuff like that. Like
I learned that in the China syndrome.
Yeah. So if you cut the water out of the whole equation, then that's like 2/3 of any of the issues that could even come up with nuclear kind of gone, right?
Yeah, the water caused the explosions at Chernobyl and SL1 through basically you overheated the reactor, and you tried to turn all the water into steam. Steam takes up 19,000 times the space of water, right? And so you boiled your freaking, you know, your baby food jar with water in it, and you shattered it. That's exactly what those two reactors were. And then when you look at the Fukushima accident, you know, you boiled the water off, and the fuel got really hot. It got up to 2,300 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, the fuel is these long rods. That rod that contains the fuel inside it is made of zirconium. Zirconium at 2,300 degrees in the presence of steam produces hydrogen gas and oxygen gas rapidly. What do you get when you have a perfect mixture in a 2-to-1 of hydrogen and oxygen? That's called a bomb.
It's called the hydrogen bomb, I believe.
Which, by the way, you can somewhat recreate this with a milk jug, some aluminum foil, and the works toilet bowl cleaner.
Stop it, Magnus! Stop it! Don't.
No, this is perfectly safe. It causes no damage. It just makes.
I understand, but YouTube is all kind of pissy about you teaching people how to blow shit up.
The known domestic terrorist is telling people how to make bombs, but no.
Oh
But I guess I don't know if we missed it, but the thorium salt reacters. But
we have not missed it. Okay. I was waiting for your return.
Okay, but I guess the other thing I'd ask is the micro reactors, the Aurora reactors. Those are also like thinking about it. There's a lot of like high energy use areas that don't really apply to other places, like you were talking about with marijuana and stuff like that, where there's like particular areas where they use tons of power, but maybe the city around them doesn't. So having like the amount of use required, like, oh, do we need a reactor here? Just drop it here, instead of building this whole grid for an entire area that might not need all of that.
Well, and then think about it from this standpoint, right? Is you know you're going to be connected to the grid just so that you can take your unit offline. You want to keep your your systems online. You got to do your maintenance. The Aurora reactor, you got to swap out the core every 20 years. But even then, you got to shut the turbine down to just do your periodic maintenance, do periodic testing on it, right? So you're going to be connected to the grid. So let's say that you have all these microreactors, in Texas, in the middle of a snowstorm, and you have the freaking natural gas shut off and all that, and but you've disconnected from the grid for your normal operation. But now you realize that, hey, my city needs some power. I can connect back to the grid. I can drop my production offline for a couple of days to be the good steward of my city and provide power to it, because I have power that I would like to use, but it's better to keep my employees and my fellow citizens warm and have water and have the ability to cook their food, right? And so you're basically microcosming your power generation, as opposed to these large scale, which wind and solar, you have to do large scale. Unless you're talking rooftop solar, and then then it's the individual homeowner that if they don't have battery backup, they're just destabilizing the grid.
Yeah.
Nice.
Great. Okay. So the thorium question. I'm ready for it.
Whoa.
I'm ready for it.
Okay, hang on.
Because I'm so curious.
I know. And trust me, you're not the only one. Like, I've been berated for a week. Man.
The only reason anyone knows about thorium reactors is because Tim Pool keeps bringing it up. Like, I've never heard of them before.
It's not even Tim Pool. It's Ian Crossland that brings it up. And then Tim Pool's like, yeah, what he said. Like,
right. So Ian Crossland's on all sorts of crazy fucking sci-fi shit all the time.
That's true, but he's also hilarious.
Before I answer the thorium question, I have to mention that when we got done with the podcast last time, I told Archaic literally that he's going to have the cult of thorium come after him because we did not address thorium.
And they did.
Yeah.
They absolutely did.
And it's been hilarious.
And I've almost felt like maybe we just wouldn't, but then Magnus was like, "No, I'm a big fan. Like, we got to talk about
well, no, because I'm generally
okay. If he's gonna co-host, we have to talk about it.
Well, because like whenever you find this thing to where like only the upper not like the upper counterculture is talking about something and no one else is, it's either a 50-50 chance that it's legit or like it is some insane pseudoscience nonsense.
Okay.
So that's why I want to know. Because no one on the ground level is talking about it, and nobody in the mainstream is talking about it, but it's just people like Ian Crossland and shit. So it's like, okay, well, what's going on here? Is this is this an untapped gem, or is this weird pseudoscience shit?
100%. And we are going to touch on that, and I also actually am going to add something to that Mark should know about. We'll see how smart this man is. But prior to that, we are going to answer another question. First,
is another person
the most
coming
important
on?
question.
The suspense.
Shut up, John.
I feel like there's no way Mark is talking to people that are this excited about nuclear all the time.
I doubt it. So I asked you the very first question.
Your wife?
Yeah, he's my wife.
The two of you.
My wife digs this. My wife has an
You gotta bring her on next time.
Yeah, she should definitely be part of the show next time.
She's asleep by now.
Oh well,
Next time.
Lazy. No, just kidding.
It just kind of cracks me up that you're literally the couple from the Godzilla movie.
They really are. That's hilarious.
What is it? Sandra Bullock, and then what's his name from Malcolm in the Middle in that movie?
Yeah,
I haven't seen that.
You're just like,
just watch the first 10 minutes about it.
The guy. And she's like, well, I'm the scientist. And he's like, well, you're still wrong.
So what's the question? What's our phone-in question?
Okay, the phone-in question is very simple. Nuclear power is the safest form of energy we have, correct?
It is. I don't want to say it's the safest because you can break down other powers.
See, and you said we have bad messaging. That's bad messaging.
You're right.
No, because as Spike Cohen showed, if you take like the amount of people that have died from every single source of energy over the last 100 years, Nuclear is at the bottom.
Yes,
The
nuclear is
very
Way
the
below,
absolute
way
bottom.
below oil, way below coal, way below hydroelectric, way below everything.
When
Like,
when
so
I
let's say
say
for-
break it down, if you're looking at solar farms, that's the only power generation source that is safer. But
Well,
when
that's
you look
only
at
if you
solar-
don't count lithium mines to make solar.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right. Or if you don't count rooftop solar, which is killing, which makes solar extremely dangerous because people are installing
What?
it and falling off of it.
Yeah, because it literally there more people have died from improperly installed rooftop solar than nuclear has killed in the entire
Yeah.
history of nuclear.
Whoa.
So
Because you get these idiot hippies like me that buy some kit off the internet and go put this 200-pound solar panel on the side of their building and then it drops off and kills grandma. Like it's a thing that actually happens. Like
Wow.
Speaking about
before Mark made it, because Mark was off like gallivanting at the restaurant or whatever. Reed
they had
had posted something in the chat that said that cops kill more people every year than nuclear kills, and I was like,
that's a
probably
legitimate
ever.
sticket. That's a legitimate statistic. That's
All
100%
right,
accurate statement.
guys, all right.
I mean, how many people
Let's
have
talk
thorium?
thorium, Mark. We don't want to. We got a bunch in the chat too. They've been coming after it.
We keep teasing them with it, like thorium.
We do.
Thorium?
We keep bringing it up. I keep mentioning it just to screw with them. I actually thought maybe we'll just end the stream without talking about it, just to screw with them. But I also know Magnus is like, no, man, I'm all about thorium.
Well, because I run in the like I said, I've been an environmental activist for 16 years now. Like I still have people, like I have connections with like Greenpeace and stuff, like upper management and Greenpeace and everything. I almost spend as much time arguing with environmentalists over like nuclear and solar panels as I do arguing about guns, which everybody knows like my opinion upon that. So like knowing every single detail is important to me, and like everything like this is the most important conversation in the world to me right now. So I need to know what the hell these things are so I can use this argument.
Before we jump into that, I got to take off. But I just want to say thanks for having me on, guys. It's been great.
All right, John.
John.
It was really
Bye.
fun.
Nice
Thanks,
to meet
bud.
you.
And give me
Nice to meet
your
you all.
hat. Give me your hat right now. I
Yeah,
want.
gonna
I
need
got
that.
another
hat.
one that's mushrooms instead.
You're gonna need to send that to Magnus. Like Magnus is poor. He needs.
I
he
told
needs
you I was
free
poor.
stuff.
I literally steal clothes from people.
Later,
All right.
John.
All right, my wife made tacos. I need to go eat. Take care, guys.
Nice.
All right, so
Shit, I dropped her on accident.
Kick station.
All right. All right. All right, Mark. We are going to we're gonna have the thorium conversation. Now, I'm gonna premise this with I probably disagree with Magnus, but you might convince me that I'm wrong.
I don't have an opinion at all on it. I know nothing about it. So
okay. Well, so
I just know that
Cool.
these types of subjects are usually like you saw it with the hydrogen powered cars, to where only people talking about it was like the Ian people. And like 10 years ago, they're like hydrogen powered cars are going to take over everything in 5 years, and then you never heard about it again. So I'm just curious if this is another thing like that.
So
True.
Well, let's start by you said thorium salt reactors, I think. So
Yeah.
So we have to
Or
first
sands,
let's-
either one, the sands or the salts, whatever. I don't know which one it is.
So it's salt because we have to separate the two, and that is that. So when you talk about reactors, you talk about fuel and you talk about coolants. So in a molten salt reactor, you're using molten salt as your coolant. Heavy water reactor using D2O2, which is titanium dioxide. Light water reactor using water. Gas cooled. There was even an oil cooled reactor, right? So that's one aspect that you're talking about the coolant, and then you've got the fuels. So and thorium is a nuclear fuel, right? We have three major types of nuclear fuel. There's some other minor ones that are produced, but the big three are uranium-235, which exists naturally. There's plutonium-241, which is generated from uranium-238, and then there's uranium-233, which is generated from thorium-232. Basically, 99.99999% of all thorium is thorium-232. Thorium is extremely abundant. You walk outside, grab a handful of dirt, there's thorium in it. That's how abundant it is. It's literally, if you look by time frame, we've got about 250,000 years worth of uranium on the planet. If you're using, plutonium-based reactors, we got 750,000 years worth of thorium on the planet. It's an extremely abundant element. All right. When you talk with people who talk about thorium, they forget that plutonium is a fuel. So they're going to debate you that it doesn't produce waste like uranium, like uranium-235 does. Well, if I burn a pure uranium-235 reactor, its waste stream is essentially the same as a thorium reactor. So, and a plutonium reactor is going to have essentially the same waste stream, meaning that your heavy elements, meaning that when you split your atoms, you produce a heavy element and a light element, and your heavy elements all end up being about the same profile, with your lighter elements, which are your short half-lives, are going to burn away. I'm getting way too technical, way too fast on this too. But
no, I'm actually following. You're a really good teacher on this.
Yeah, this isn't this. You're doing,
and I'm
quite
stupid,
well.
So you're doing a great job.
So, now let's talk about the Manhattan Project, right? Because 3 is an important number because the Army is using 3 designs for their microreactor program. Whenever you're doing a major program, you always start with 3 and you drop 1, and then you compete the last 2, and they both produce for fruition, right? In the Manhattan Project, there were 3 teams that were there to produce nuclear weapons for the war effort in World War II. You had the team that produced the little boy bomb, which is a uranium-based bomb, which is dropped on Hiroshima. There was a team that produced a Nagasaki bomb, or the Fat Boy, which is dropped in Nagasaki. And there was a team that got cut out early on that produced uranium-233 to make a bomb. We detonated uranium-233 as a bomb. That's another thing that the thorium people like to say, well, we can't produce weapons. It's more difficult to produce a weapon than others, which is why it was not chosen, but you can do it, right? So I'm just kind of breaking down some of the thorium arguments. And one of the other arguments I hear is that thorium can burn nuclear waste. If I put nuclear waste and thorium together, I have a blended fuel. I'm now a mix of a plutonium reactor, a uranium reactor, because there's a little of uranium-235 in there, and a thorium reactor. Or burning it all. It doesn't matter. I'm a fan of that. There's a company called Thorcon. They get their name from thorium. They're based out of Seattle. They're going to build these floating power modules, build them in shipyards, move them into Africa to power Africa, right? They are a molten salt reactor design. And they basically said, well, what fuel do you want, customer? Do you want uranium? Do you want thorium? Do you want plutonium? Do you want blend? You tell us. That's what we'll put in it. So I can design my reactor around my fuel. And in this case, the Thor kind of said I can design that. One of the things when you're talking about fuels, and then we have to get into I'm going to go way more into detail, which is way more complex here, is that now we're talking about the different neutrons that they take. So uranium-235 uses what's known as a thermal neutron or a low energy neutron. Water takes high energy neutrons, which is when they're generated from the nuclear reaction, and it rapidly drops it down to thermal levels, which is why water is a great coolant when you're using uranium-based fuel, uranium-235 fuel. But if you're going to go into if you want to use a plutonium-based fuel, you want to use a fast spectrum. So this is why the BN800, the reactor out in Russia, is a molten sodium reactor, because it keeps the energy level of the neutrons really high so that it can be absorbed by the plutonium to cause that reaction. Thorium is somewhere in between them. It's got a larger range. It's not fast, like high energy fast, but it absorbs as they come down. So there is discussion.
Can I stop right there, because I want to make sure the audience understands what's the difference between high energy and low energy, and why does that matter as far as how we're doing things?
So I mean, you'll probably explain the other part better, but for other people, in this context, high energy or low energy doesn't mean output to like turn your light bulbs on. This is like nuclear in the sense of the atoms and stuff.
I understand that, Magnus.
I'm just saying for the other
people
that
will
not
understand.
Yeah, that's why I'm explaining that to like other people.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the nucleus of the atoms absorb neutrons based on its energy state, right? And so it has to be at a right energy state for the nucleus to want to absorb it. right?
Okay.
So you're just trying. It's almost like finding the right cipher code for your atom, right? And then all of a sudden the nucleus goes, "Yep, I want that neutron because it's." I don't remember the mega electron volt energy state, but let's say it's 100.
So it's neutron sex. I got you.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's like
it's baking. It's like baking as a science. Yeast operates best at a certain temperature.
Yeah,
it operates best with the energy.
Very similar. It's a very similar way of putting that, or a good analogy. And thorium operates. It's not thermal because it works above the thermal scale, but it's not. It's considered fast because anything that's not thermal is really considered fast because we suck at communication in my industry. But one of the things that's fascinating is that they're talking. You can use thorium in existing reactors. In fact, the very first commercial reactor in the United States was at Shippingport, and it ran off all three fuels, right? Mm-hmm. So the very first reactor in the United States was it started with uranium, had a uranium seed to produce plutonium with its original 2 cores, and its 3rd core, it used what plutonium was left over to then generate uranium-233 from thorium to operate. So knowing that we can do this, there's actually companies out there that are trying to figure out, what if I turn around and I use a blended fuel of a higher enriched uranium, say up to 20%, and blend it with thorium, and I use that as my fuel. Well, instead of my fuel assemblies lasting every 4 years, they're going to last, say, 20 years. So now I'm having to replace fuel assemblies every 20 years instead of every 4 years. So that's kind of the idea behind it, is it because it's not going to reserve it great, but now you're looking at your waste generation. I'm generating, say 1/2, 1/3 of the amount of waste. That's an accurate.
I think she was talking about the messaging.
No,
so the conclusion I'm coming to here, it seems like thorium, in terms of messaging and why it's catching steam with like podcasters and people like Russell Brand and stuff like that, it seems to be like a middle ground of people that don't want to fully come out and embrace nuclear energy, but also want to make it seem to like the people that have been propagandized that it's this new technology that makes nuclear way different when it's not. So it almost seems to be like a counter propaganda sort of thing.
It is, and the other thing I think that the benefit that thorium has is that if you look at its name, you have Thor, right, as the base, and
right, Avenger is popular,
the thunder god,
right? I mean, and uranium and plutonium are named after old Roman gods and
Roman gods,
right? And so they have kind of that old school feel. They're Uranus and Pluto are way out there, cold and kind of dark. So you don't have that negative connotation with thorium. So thorium does provide messaging, and probably the biggest person who's promoted thorium is Andrew Yang. He came out with that and talked about it in the Democratic debates during the 2020 election. And I have to tell people, I said, I like thorium. Thorium's a fine fuel, but when you look at it for nuclear power, it's the one we have the least experience with. I'm not saying that we shouldn't use it, but we have an abundance. We have to mine it, process it, prepare it. And thorium doesn't work. I can't just throw thorium into a reactor and make it work. I have to have something else to turn it into uranium-233 to then make, turn it into a fuel. And then the other
right.
thing,
so it basically becomes a, it kind of gets in its own way in a sense.
Well, and then the other question I was asked, and this is a question that none of the nuclear engineers have ever even answered for me, right? So I'm
including the wife.
Not even, yeah, and this is how many neutrons are produced when you fission uranium-233. Like, there's just not enough information out there. If I fission a uranium-235 atom, I get 2.48 neutrons on average, right? So it's an average out of millions and millions of fissions. For plutonium, it's 2.91. So when I'm operating a reactor, I have to do something with those neutrons, right? So in a uranium-235 reactor, one of those neutrons keeps the reaction going, right? And then I have to deal with the 1.48. It has to be absorbed by something else. That's what the boric acid is for, is to absorb that extra 1.48. It's known as a poison. Again, bad messaging, right? So it's using to control the action. It's absorbing the extra neutrons. In a plutonium reactor, I have uranium-238, right? That's my fuel source. It's going to be converted into plutonium. So my 2.91 neutrons, I have one neutron that's used to keep the reaction sustained. My second neutron is used to convert uranium-238 into plutonium. And then I have that 0.91, which is used for lossage and leakage. And that, to me, when I see that, that makes a lot of sense. I can make that work. I've got a huge excess, a relatively large excess. But with uranium-233, right, if you notice that the number was bigger for those other two and they got bigger, no nuclear engineer's been able to tell me what the actual, or if we don't have the data to tell me how many fission or how many neutrons you get. So is it down below 2? Is it 2.1? Now you have to have you have to control your neutrons to the point where it can't get absorbed by anything, or you're basically running out of fuel because you can't reproduce your fuel, or you have to add in something for fuel.
So that's something that there just needs to be more like test reactors and data on. It's kind of like a frontier sort of science right now.
And I would say there's two guys that they were partners and they hate each other now. One's named Kirk Sorensen, and there's Ed Pyle. And I hate
some great scientific endeavors have come out of partners that now hate each other. So Ed Pyle is a nuclear engineer, and Kirk Sorensen was an aerospace engineer that then got his master's degree in the history behind nuclear energy, and likes to freaking tout that. And they both hate me because I call out their bullshit. But and
I'm more of a fan of you now. I don't know why.
No, because it's funny because Stacia was here, and Stacia was part of like the Unity Party, and then there's my whole backstory, and then we're all people that are like desperately trying to solve problems in our own circles while being attacked by literally the entire like force of the world. So there's kinship there. I love it.
So Kirk Sorensen refers himself as a thorium evangelist. I'm like, well, first off, it's not a goddamn religion, and you've turned it into a religion, and that's why the cult of thorium exists, is because of Kirk Sorensen, because he's literally created around it. And I remember he
explains so much about Adam Crickler then, because he's a big culty boy. So speaking of which, I'm going to start shilling for you to get on Timcast so you can finally.
I would love to get on Timcast.
Yes.
Yeah, we need to get you on.
I'm actually pretty decent friends with Ian. I might be able to pull this off.
Dude, he's had three of my friends on now, and I've wanted to go on his show really bad.
Well, I've already been chilling with Ian for you, Magnus. I
get on it. But yeah, no,
Mark's better. Mark's a better guest than you.
Oh,
he needs to go and talk about nuclear.
Do both back to back, but we definitely need to get you on there because they bring up thorium like every other episode now, and it's like, okay, we need it.
And so Kirk Sorensen calling himself a thorium evangelist, which I absolutely hate because it's the wrong messaging, in my opinion.
Look at this. Stacia came back.
But I heard y'all talking about Unity and had to hop on.
Yeah.
But then Ed Pyle, who was his partner, and they he stole my proprietary information, and they each had their own companies, Flybe and Elysium Industries, and literally.
I mean, if you're not stealing from your partner, are you really partners?
Yeah, but I mean, it's fascinating because Ed Pyle reached out to me after Kirk Sorensen was on Scott Adams' podcast to talk about thorium. And by the way, I had Scott ask like 2 questions, and Kirk Sorensen couldn't answer them like effectively, and I was like, "You suck at this. You're terrible at this." And it was like proliferation and I can't remember the other. It's like I'd be like, I
we didn't even get to proliferation. We're gonna have to work on the next show on those. We have so much more.
But the fact is, Ed Pyle reached out to me and he goes, "We don't know if we can make a thorium reaction sustainable on its own." So I said, "Okay, so thorium may always have to be blended fuel, but I also have to go. Wait a minute, Ed Pyle is the anti-Kirk Sorensen, so I don't know if he's being honest with me." So
right.
So
you don't know if there's some left Twix, right Twix shenanigans going on.
So when I talk about thorium, I say thorium's a fine fuel. I love the idea of thorium reactors. I just know what I don't know about it, which is I don't know if it's viable, if we can produce it, or if we do need something. And it may be a great, have a blended, plutonium thorium reactor that, is primarily thorium with uranium to keep those excess neutrons to make the reaction maintain and operate. And I think that'd be amazing, but I don't know, or maybe we can. I don't know. but
right.
No one has been able
So
to give me that
it
number.
comes down to we don't have the actual data.
I
To
believe
know
so.
what's a valuable or of value, I suppose, right? Is that what?
I have to believe that we have the data based on the test reactors that we have. That we constantly are bombarding random things in these test reactors at the universities, at the national
That does not make me feel safe.
Yeah, I'm gonna like create some Hollywood movie where you accidentally, some large Hadron Collider stuff where you open a portal to hell by accident.
And then Magnus and all the Boogaloos come out, and they're like, "Yeah."
That's actually where I'm from. Everybody asks why I'm so weird. I came out of a thorium reactor test.
Okay, good.
I almost killed Stacia there.
Now it's safe. Now we understand
Stacia,
where
we're
we're at.
off your camera now.
I'm sorry, Mark. This is my show.
But it's great. I love any kind of banter on there and stuff.
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
I'm sure you have many dry boardroom meetings where nobody cracks a smile. So I'm sure this is refreshing.
You have no idea. I mean,
I most of my friends.
I have no idea. I promise.
Let's say most of my friends are like computer science geeks, and they don't know what a sense of humor is. They can't mathematically calculate it. So I'm sure I understand.
Oh well, yeah. So in my industry, we joke that you could tell a nuclear engineer that's an introvert or an extrovert compared to an introvert is because they're looking at your shoes instead of their own.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Like eye contact is something that my industry struggles with. Like, we're all on the spectrum. It just, how bad into Asperger's we have.
Hey, go team high functioning.
Yeah,
Isn't that basically libertarians too?
Oh yeah, the libertarian.
Yeah,
the libertarian to autism pipeline is very strong.
So like give you an idea of how we are as a group. So one of the evolutions that we do, we have to we're swapping in these big giant demineralizers, big giant Brita water filters. It's literally the same beads that are the Brita water filter, to make your water
right,
clean,
just
right?
like some like carbon beads essentially, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean they're poly, but they're plastic.
Right.
But same concept, right? And so when we go to swap these things out, I have to call into the control room and say, hey, I need to know what your power is. And there's two different methods. One is a computer-based program. The other is just the meter, right? And it says, if available, get it by this one as your preferred, the computer-based one. And so I call, hey, what's your calc? Because that's the term on the sheet. And this one guy goes, do you want to know if it's available? And I'm like, I'm pretty certain by me asking you what your calc is, that you can assume that I want to know if it's available. But the procedure says you have to know if it's available. I'm like, are you being serious right now? And he is literally being serious. And I'm like, yes, I guess I want to know it's available. Like literally cannot get beyond that. And so I'm literally calling him like, hey, so what's your calc? Some other reactor operator. And he goes, it's 99.85%. I said, is your calc available? And he'll die because you're talking about Danny, aren't you? I'm like, yep, I sure am. Because so we've got some really special people. So
nice. All right, we are going to start to wind down here. No offense, Stacia. I know you just got back, but
no,
you
my phone
have a
actually
question. You're pointing your finger like you have something.
No, it's fine.
Stacia
makes the party go too late. She's like the single-handedly the reason why my sleep schedule is ruined right now.
It's because she's a digital nomad. It's her fault. So if you have a question, throw it out there.
She's also a filthy Californian. So
California.
Our time zone's later, so sorry guys.
It was so fun because I drove through Arizona in the middle of daylight savings time. So we literally went from Texas, and then halfway through Texas, the time switched, and then we drove to Arizona, and the time switched again, and then we drove out of Arizona and the time switched again. So it was like, this is all an illusion. This means nothing.
Yeah.
Because Arizona doesn't do daylight savings time.
No, and neither does Hawaii. They're the only two states in America. Anyway, Stacia, you have a question, so lay it on him.
Oh, well, I was just going to say my phone's going to die at any moment. But I do have a question. It's not
That's not a question.
totally related to nuclear, but I'm super curious if you're a libertarian and or anarchist based on a lot of things that you said. Like
I don't consider myself a libertarian or an anarchist. I'm willing to talk to anybody. So when I got asked to I don't know who, I think it was Todd, right?
Jeremy Todd.
Yeah. Jeremy Todd,
Yeah.
he found me, and then he said, we need to have this guy on, because I was talking nuclear energy, and he followed me and said, we need to have this guy on. I'm like, I will talk to anybody. I don't care if it's, I fall more onto, in the political spectrum of the U.S. I end up communicating more on the right, just because
He's right of center. He's a Republican.
Yeah. So,
well,
fortunately, I live
just
in a state where you
wondering
don't have to register, so
Oh, nice.
you don't have to register.
As you don't know, I'm like a straight up like 100% anarchist, and then I don't know what archaic is, and then Stacia is a ever converting filthy liberal that we're getting to embrace anarchism every day. So
we're educating her slowly.
I actually feel like Mark helped convince me of anarchism even more than anyone I've talked to.
How'd that happen? Hey, Mark, how'd you pull that off?
It was probably the
So that's why.
Oh no! Actually, no. Stacia, you said that he proved to you how regulation works, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a simple fact of the matter. The more you have to interact with the government, the poorer your opinion upon it is. That
and
is
the
like
poorer you will become.
That is a constant. If you look at people that have to interact with the government on a daily basis, they are not the biggest fans.
Right. No, I remember this. Stacia told me this. Mark, you turned her that way because you explained how your own industry regulates itself without actual government oversight for the most part. Like, they don't fund it. The government doesn't fund it.
Well, and interesting fact is the regulatory body for the nuclear industry, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, is funded by the industry as well. So we pay the people that fund us.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems ridiculous, but okay.
Well, I mean,
I love it. I love it though because
I love it too because it works.
Because there's not nuclear power plants blowing up all over the place, but I can't go 2 weeks without hearing about some oil tanker that killed a bunch of ocean life, or some pipeline that burst a leak and poisoned a bunch of people in Minnesota or something like that.
Or
those stories are bi-weekly.
Exploding.
Right. Those are bi-weekly. Like when I went to the Gulf of Mexico, there's still oil in the Gulf of Mexico, but then again, like I have friends.
Who's gonna save the ducks, Magnus?
Right. But then I have friends that go camp on 3 Mile Island and go to Chernobyl for like the meme, So it's like,
didn't Luke go to 3 Mile Island too at one point?
Moot did.
He did. He went, right? Okay.
Not everybody knows who Moot is. That's some deep internet lore.
Yeah. Okay.
He was the creator.
Guys,
he was the creator of 4chan. That's who.
Moot is. Yeah. Okay, guys. This Mark, I can't even explain to you how fun this has been for me. How awesome. We still haven't really got all the way through it, right? Like we didn't even talk about nuclear weapons. It's almost like we didn't
like
give the audience
next time.
Everything.
I've been holding it in, but I have been like fangirling this whole time because I just casually have access to like someone in the nuclear industry as like a guy who's been, because it's been like 5 or 6 years of hanging out with my hippie friends and getting into fucking wars with people over nuclear energy. Like people have stopped talking to me over nuclear energy. So like I'm so excited to be here.
So one of the things that cracks me up are the number of people that literally, you know, they go, well, look at this, and they'll show me an article like, do you see this? And they'll, you know, it's got some statistic about how much radiation, all that stuff. And they're like, people are getting cancer, they're dying because of this. And I'm like, that you realize that's a really slow day of radiation exposure for me at work. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, that's.
So they're like, that's not real.
I call that
obviously,
an hour of work.
Right. I'm really bad with numbers, but there was one article infamously that was going around that they cited some number of like radiation exposure, and they're like, this is so awful. And then literally in the comments, someone took the amount you get from direct sunlight over 24 hours, and it was like 3 times as much. It was like, oh God. I forget what article it was, but it was like a horribly sourced, typical like propaganda article about like the horrors of nuclear energy.
Wow.
There was a protest at a plant in the U.S. where they were protesting because there was a tritium release, and this pro-nuclear group went up there and they showed up with boxes of bananas, and they handed everyone bananas. And after everyone eaten the bananas, they handed them a card that explained how they just received 10 times the dose of radiation from that banana than was ever going to be they were going to ever get from the tritium release.
Oh my God! So this goes into my favorite real world shit post of all time. So this infamous YouTuber, I forget his name now, but he walked around New York, California, and Texas, and he was handing out flyers about the danger of dihydrogen monoxide and how dihydrogen monoxide killed all these people and how it was a threat to humanity, and we need to do something about dihydrogen monoxide. For anyone who hasn't picked up on the joke, so many, it's hilarious. For people that haven't picked up on it yet, dihydrogen monoxide is H2O, and people
think about the number of babies that have died because of drowning in dihydrogen.
This guy, I think the number ended up being like he ended up getting like 10,300 signatures to ban dihydrogen monoxide in the United States.
We're gonna ban water because you know you might die.
Fuck it. That's your American education system right there, guys. Just
Wow.
That's so funny.
And I recreated this. I recreated this personally on like probably like 20 of my friends and be like, bro, have you ever heard of dihydrogen monoxide? And they fall for it every time. But that goes to show how like
great.
There's entire web pages. There's entire web pages dedicated to the ban dihydrogen monoxide movement with great memes. I mean, they are hilarious. Like did you know that dihydrogen monoxide was the #1 ingredient in the mustard gas that the Germans deployed in World War I?
It's also the #1 reason people drowned. Just saying.
Yeah, like that just goes to show of like how easy people are manipulated by like faux science. I mean, look no further than like the touch of death martial arts people that are like using quantum physics. I can touch people and kill them, and like hundreds of thousands of people are like, this is totally real, bro. Now expand that to nuclear energy. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Have you heard of the Pacific Northwest tree octopus?
No.
It's the
but
first.
Now you're gonna tell us about it.
It was the first case of internet science where someone took and they used, this is in the 90s, mind you, they photoshopped an octopus in a tree and they created this whole story about mating habits and I
heard about this actually.
Yes, it like rides the back of Bigfoot. Like I'm not.
And people bought it.
I think it actually. I'm sorry. Did James Lindsay write this paper?
No. This legitimately got into. It's very similar to the James Lindsay stuff because this legitimately got into a scientific journal. They never once bothered to go to the Pacific Northwest to see if there was giant octopuses in the fucking trees before they put in a legit scientific, like accredited, given out at universities scientific journal.
Yeah, it was the first case of an internet. It's really the first case of an internet meme, right? That really did did create. It's the origin. I mean, I grew up in Oregon, so it's very entertaining. So
right, because what was the dead?
I
think
almost feel like
I
this
think it's
one's
called
a stalker of yours, Mark.
Right.
I'm not entirely sure at this point.
I think they're called like the Dead Cow Society or whatever, but it was like infamous like proto-anarchists. They had a lot to do with Burning Man and everything. We're like heavily involved in getting that happening.
Yeah.
So like these were the people that were internet trolls before the internet existed. Like,
That's so funny.
We're gonna have our own Burning Man for the libertarian anarchist movement soon.
That's Pork Fest,
Mark's
right?
coming.
That's Pork Fest.
Interesting
No,
fact.
no, not Pork Fest. Next year is where we're looking at.
Did you know that you would not have the internet without nuclear power or without nuclear weapons?
That I do know.
I did not. Nope.
I did not know that, but that's awesome.
Well, you know, Stacia, you do know about this.
Wait,
no,
that can't be true. That can't be true because Al Gore created and invented the internet, and he is very anti-nuclear because it's super dangerous. So you're wrong, obviously.
Yeah, but during our anarchism debate, I brought up how that like the internet we use now was because a bunch of anarchists stole DARPA military technology and stuff like that. That was from the nuclear energy. Yeah, it was all based around like Mark can explain it better, but yeah.
So the lab at CERN and DESI, which are the German and French laboratories, they created the World Wide Web as a method for NATO to coordinate a return strike of nuclear weapons against the Soviet Union in the 1980s. So it was basically a method so that in the
worldwide war machine.
Yeah, that's why it's the World Wide Web.
Yeah, and then that's why I brought like a bunch of anarchists and like free net people got a hold of it, and that's where the idea of the internet we have now like started percolating. Is they jacked military infrastructure to like create what we're using right now to nonsense about politics and things.
Wow.
Carry on, Mark. I apologize. You know, we tend to interrupt people. My apologies.
This is entertaining and it's fun, and I like.
And also, I take any opportunity to shill anarchism. So, because I'm going to convert Stacia. I will get her. I will get her flying the black flag by the end of the year.
So,
will get her.
By the way, Magnus, Arcaic, asked me if it was okay for me to be on this with you. And he said because you're a boogaloo, is that what it is?
Boogaloo boy.
Boogaloo boy. I had to Google it.
He's a terrorist, I'm told.
No, literally. So Medium magazine released an article called "The Top 10 Most Dangerous People on the Internet in 2020." This guy right here you're talking to right now, is considered, according to this article, as dangerous as Mark Zuckerberg and Donald Trump.
I've seen it. He's on there, right behind Trump.
It's the beard.
It's the beard.
I am the most harmless, dorky person in the world. Don't ask me, but
I'm working on the beard now because I want to be one of the most dangerous too. Working on it.
I'm working on it too. One day.
Stacia, I will definitely start hitting on you if you start growing a beard. I'll warn you.
Well, really weird, but okay.
That might be a little too much Amish. I don't know if I can.
Like, I mean, she was maybe cute, but now that she has a beard, now it's all on.
Yeah. I wanted to see your hands. Magnus, hands above the table for this conversation.
Come on, lady. I don't even know if you're legit unless you got hair and knuckles.
Fucking God.
Just because this group I think would find this hilarious. So I was on the USA and Lincoln, and we have our own we run movies all day long. We have our own we have AFN, the Armed Forces Network. And then we just have movie channels that they plug in movies on a set schedule. And you'll figure an aircraft carrier, a bunch of pilots. Guess what movie they play all the time? Top Gun, obviously, right? So I go in the wardroom. And
by the way, fuck you, Tom Cruise, for not letting Maverick drop yet.
So
carry on. Sorry.
So there's where we eat the wardroom. The officers eat. The pilots can't sit by themselves, so they grab the smallest table. There's 2 of them, and then you just keep adding. So like 30 people sitting around this table, and everyone's got like 2 inches of space, right? So Top Gun. Meanwhile, all the ship's company guys, we're all spread out. Like we've got these giant tables, like 4 people at it. We're like losers over there. We're constantly making fun of the air wing because they're not attached to the ship. They're physically
they own command structure, their own everything pretty much.
So Top Gun comes on, and I look up and I'm like, all right, gentlemen, hands above the table. Stop touching each other. Stop it. It's a bad pilot.
I know you're getting excited at the shirtless scene of them playing volleyball. Don't lie to me.
You know what's hilarious about this is Stacia does know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
She's like, I have no idea.
Which is crazy because we're in the same generation, but I was just raised by like military people and like boomers in a rural town. So even though I grew up in the 90s, I really grew up in the 80s because we were 10 years behind. Like we had a roller skating rink that played disco, and this was like 1998. And there were like a roller skating rink that played disco. So like I'm like a weird transplant from a different generation.
100%. It's just really funny because I'm like watching this video here, and she's over here like, I don't even know what Top Gun is. I don't know what you're talking about.
Literally, me and Stacia have conversations every day where I blow her mind with some crazy shit she never heard of before.
You do know some crazy hilarious shit.
Oh man, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Well, Mark and I could probably blow both of your minds if we wanted to.
I'm going to do a whole podcast about Operation Gladio, which is like the least discussed, most important historical event of all time.
That's very interesting.
If you don't know what Operation Gladio is,
I'm not going on your show for that. Just so you know.
You need to look it up. It's the most interesting thing in the world. But
it is.
We're coming up on 3 hours though, so I might have to.
Yeah, we are going to close out at this point. Mark, dude, I really appreciate you doing this. Unfortunately, we still didn't even get to it. Like we didn't even get to all the stuff. So you're gonna have to come back again. Just so you know.
Do you have like a Twitter or anything so I can advertise you a lot? Because I am looking to like
shit. See,
chill.
I am such a piece of shit. I didn't even like get it. Bam, there he is. Look at him right there.
We're going right now.
Schneider.
Yep, me too.
But everything's in the comments, or in the description of the video. I've got all of Mark's stuff. Well, actually, only Mark's Twitter because whatever. I also have Magnus's stuff. Not Stacey's because she's just a guest.
I don't even remember when I followed you, but I'm already following you. Sweet.
Well, because he's the nuclear boss.
I think you followed me the same day that Archaic. I said you were going to be on. You were going to be on this.
Word. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I need to put you on notifications because I'm going to use you as my dedicated propaganda arm for
except for all he talks about on Twitter. All Mark talks about on Twitter is his workout routine, which we also didn't get to.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
because he runs like 9,000 miles a day. He does 25 push-ups and tries to pick up his wife like 1,300 times a day.
That's good though, because I need to get in shape because when I was in Louisville for the Breonna Taylor anniversary, we marched 7 miles in full kit. By the way, including that bulletproof vest, which that's 40 pounds, and then the rifle, and then the rest of my kit, that's like 70 pounds of gear. I wanted to die afterwards, so I really need to get in shape. So I might steal your workout routine.
So I woke up yesterday and ran a half marathon on a whim.
Oh my God.
What?
Yeah. 5 miles. This dude runs 5 miles almost every morning.
Yeah. I ran, I started it in January, and in January I ran my first mile and it took me 13 minutes and I was dying. I like wheezed. I wheezed for like 3 weeks but it's just this is the 107th day of the year and I have missed running 4 days. But yeah, I've lost 37 pounds. Like it's crazy. I did that, that whole, everyone gained their COVID-19 weight. I gained 20 pounds. I was like,
I gained 50 pounds over COVID. I'm actually a really skinny boy. So
I def gained.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Mark, this has been it's actually at this point now my favorite show I've ever done.
100%.
I really appreciate it. Part 3 will be coming up. I will be working with Mark on that until we can get to it and we can talk more nuclear. Magnus, I really appreciate you co-hosting. And Stacia, of course, your beauty is always welcome on my show.
Stacey's my favorite.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you didn't, I really also don't care because bite me. All right. Peace, homies.
All right.